13 bigger clients. One client had 1.3 million dollars worth at the top, worth of hex, and now that everything is pretty much just shit to bed, how do you are you still shilling like hex to your clients and whatever else? Because it's like, I don't know, it's really hard for hex in the future to be like blue chip, in my opinion, if it's going to keep going down by 99%.
Guys, can I interject here? I just want to like kind of throw another question that glued to Tio. And by the way, welcome back to the Matrix. Glad to see you're back on it. But is there any way to track how much was used through Tornado Cash, which I assume a lot was for Hex or PLSX or PLS? Like, isn't that something that would probably scare Richard if he has to defend himself in court?
Tornado Cash has never been traced. Like, you can only trace it within like, somebody did it within like a half an hour. So if somebody, as long as you're leaving it in there for like at least a week, it's kind of like a mixer. Like, just picture like you're leaving your laundry on for a week and it's just being slushed around. The longer you leave it in there, the more mixed it gets. That's all it does.
Right.
It's completely untrackable, pretty much.
Right. So I would imagine that if this guy was running this operation for Hex, and I mean, I assume that a lot of the funds that were raised or sacrificed, however you want to call it, were his own funds. And so how would really anyone track what he would be able to do, let's say using like Tornado Cash over the last several years? Is that something that
you can't,
right? So like, I'm just asking Glutathione, like, what do you think about that situation?
Well, I mean, if you can do it, I think the United States of America has a big bounty for you.
Well, I mean, he's being sued by the SEC, so
he's being sued for not like. It's funny the way, like, if you read that lawsuit, like the way it reads to me is like they're suing him because he raised funds and he didn't like do marketing properly. Like, it doesn't say anything about like it being an actual security. They're just going after him for like, hey, you didn't market properly, and now your users are pissed. It's like it's like the whole lawsuit is complete like fugazi. It's complete garbage. And the fact that they tripped up on XRP, it's like, if you can't even prove XRP is a security, like, goddamn, every goddamn meme coin in the world is going to be a security. Like, they just minted all of XRP out of nowhere and gave it to people. And then
I agree with you.
And then they can lock people's wallet. They locked Jeb McCaleb's wallet, so he had to fork it for XLM. So it's like, it's not only a security, but it's like, what's that? Like, there's ownership over the chain. It's so fucking centralized. It's like they had all the eggs in one basket, and they couldn't even do that right. It doesn't make any sense to me.
What are you saying? All the eggs are in one basket with respect to what? I'm sorry, I was just feeding my doggies, actually. I apologize.
In, like, for them to get, like, a win on XRP, it's like XRP is the biggest shitbag crypto. It's so centralized. They can lock people's wallets. They can do whatever they want. They can, like, it's just, they owned 100% of this, or what was it, 80% of the supply, and then they airdropped, I think, 20 or 30% to Bitcoin holders. Yeah, it was like, I don't know.
Yeah, so I think that's a key case in the history of, this war on crypto that's been going on, in my opinion, since World War II, when Alan Turing, and his team at Bletchley Park saved planet Earth from the Nazis. And then effectively he committed suicide because he was gay. And so you have freedom of speech, freedom of expression that saved the world from World War II. And then they killed him, freedom of expression as well. And then going forward to the 90s, PGP against Phil Zimmerman, Clinton administration, Hal Finney. If you don't know that story, Google that really quick. Clinton administration against Phil Zimmerman. Hal Finney was Phil Zimmerman's number 2. Hal Finney received the first Bitcoin. That case was in the 90s, went on. Ultimately, freedom of speech, cryptography won out. And now you have modern day crypto. And XRP beat the SEC in the Southern District of New York. And that is like nothing short of spectacular. Now, I will say that the difference there is XRP never had an ICO. XRP, the justification there was no ICO, and the sales on exchanges are secondary. And because there was no ICO, there was no essentially investment, a pool. There was no money from the public given to a promoter to promote an asset. That's essentially like an IPO, ICO, which were, majority of which were deemed to be, illegal securities, whatever. Whereas XRP just started on the exchanges. And that was the difference. That's the key nuance that the judge in the Southern District of New York, even though it's being appealed, I think they're going to win, because the case law, how we test the nuance is that generally how we test is the public advertising a financial product to the public gives money to a promoter, and then the promoter makes that investment more valuable. But the public has to give money to a promoter in like an event, you're raising money in that event, and that's the Howey test. The Howey test is not sales on secondary exchanges, and that's kind of how Ripple won that case, which is a bit different than ICOs and ultimately the sacrifices. But that's kind of where it also is different, in that it's a sacrifice with no expectation of profit, and it's a political demonstration. And there is Supreme Court case law on that matter as well in Citizens United. And I direct you to also look at the Citizens United case. There's a wonderful case that Richard can make here. There truly is.
No, I think Richard's going to win this if he doesn't settle. If they actually do bring it to court, I think it's a complete win, in my opinion.
It's really, who are his lawyers and how good are they? When you hire an attorney, there's a whole range of, loser lawyers to really elite lawyers. Ripple, magic. Those lawyers were Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, magical operators. He should hire those lawyers. In fact, everybody in crypto should hire those lawyers for the rest of crypto forever, because they did something that no one thought anyone could do. Unfortunately, they're probably like $2,000 an hour, but Richard has the bag. So I'm hoping, that he does this. Everybody eventually does make money from Pulse Chain, PulseX, Hex. And just, again, key thing on the last page of the complaint from the SEC, it says that these coins are worthless and everybody lost money. They're not worthless. They have multi-billion-dollar valuations with good stablecoin liquidity. If you want to get out, you can get out. Get out. Just sell. Get out if you want. No one's stopping you. It's, and what if everybody makes money?
When they first initially launched their lawsuit, I'm pretty sure Hex was only down like 20 or 30%. I think it was sitting around 30 cents, give or take. And then that news came out and it went from 30 cents to under a penny. So, I mean, it's technically...
you mean against the Hex influencers? The lawsuit against cases against the Hex influencers?
Yeah, as soon as that started coming out, that's when like the shit started to really hit the fan. So I'd say like they did more damage than Richard's done to that coin than yeah.
My bad here. Let's get some of his hands. Keep the flow. And I stepped away for a second. Let's go to Danny, and then we'll see Liberty, and then bring it around.
Thank you so much. Very interesting discussion from all sides. Shout out to Gary, who made some great points. And Cleo, what you have to say is interesting. But I would like to bring everybody back to a central point, if I could, which is that the sacrifice, in my opinion, was actually a sacrifice. It was nothing other than that. So first, let me take this one thing at a time, and I'll try and be as brief as possible, but I think it really is interesting when you get into it. So what's a sacrifice? Well, if we go back prior to the days of Pulse and even Hex, and we go back to 2018, that's when Sci-Vibe came out. Now, even prior to that, Richard was making political statements and statements about the best way to run your life and everything else. And he created a huge following, which is part of the reason that Hex was able to get off the ground in the first place, because people agreed with Richard. And they also liked his views on crypto, which were spot on. All right, now, this was a sacrifice because when you put a transaction on a blockchain, it is there throughout computers, decentralized all over the world for the world to see what you did. And if I decided to take $10,000 and burn it in the street as a political statement, I could do that. But when you do it on blockchain, it's forever. Now, two things can be true at the same time. What Richard always promised us is that if everything went right, there might be a chance we would get something that would have no value when it was introduced, but that the market might give it value. He never said we absolutely would. He never even made a forward-looking prediction of value. What he did is he always would say, this is what was true in the past, and this is why I think this product is better. So who knows, this might be possible, but this is not a prediction. And he said it about forward-looking predictions, and he always used actual data from the past. So I don't think he's in trouble there. Now then, let me take you guys to January 9th, 2022. That is exactly when the first pulse sacrifice was happening. And there was a live stream. You guys can look it up on hex. I think it's IO. There's a search engine, but it's January 9th, 2022. Richard said, where will the sacrifice money go? Will it go to the SINS Foundation? Where will the Pulse X sacrifices go? So I guess this was Pulse X at this point. Yeah. Anyway, he says, hey, brother, do you know what sacrifice means? It means it ain't yours anymore. So don't worry about it. You will have no expectation of profit from the work of others. So this question sounds like, can I please have expectations? No, you can't have any expectations. Sorry. By the way, the same stupid questions we received during the Hex launch phase as well. It was a meme like, where does the ETH go? The price went up 10,000x, by the way, before staking in 623 days, unquote. So to me, when you get statements like that, there's no question. And I respect Cleo over there, but he has no particular instance. If you ask him, of where exactly Richard promised something that he didn't do. When that money went in there, I don't care if Richard went and bought 1,000 fur-covered sinks and turned the water on and ruined the fur. We have no expectations. Now, it does kind of work out that people tend to do what's in their own best interest. And I think when you look at what Richard's motivation apparently was, since most of that money didn't move around a lot other than to give Richard some degree of centralized ownership, which we all in the Hex community appreciate. But it doesn't seem like a whole lot of that went to self-gain. And frankly, even if it did, we'd have, as long as he delivered what he said we would get if things worked out and if the code could happen, then I'm perfectly happy. And I think that the SEC has no case.
To counter you, you said that he didn't make any promises, which, he said no expectations, whatever.
Right.
What about the date of Pulse Chain release? What about that?
He said in many situations, I think it'll be 2 more weeks. I think it's going to be this. Then he'd come back and say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to make any more guarantees about anything because it seems like whenever I say stuff, I'm wrong. And I'm paraphrasing there. But I don't believe he ever said, mark my words, ladies and gentlemen, on this date, this will get released. And I promise and I swear this will happen. Nothing like that.
Well, he did say we're going to be faster than Ethereum, which it is. We're going to beat them to proof of stake, which he did not. And he said other things like that.
He did say I try and beat them. I don't think he said I guarantee and swear that we will beat them to proof of stake. He said things like it looks like, it seems like. I think he was always careful with his language.
I actually would bet reviewing the video that you're incorrect about that, and that he actually did
bring
say
me a quote, and I will apologize for that.
I'll look for it after this, but I'm betting that he did say, you don't have to say guarantee. All you have to do is say that we will be faster than Ethereum, which it is. We will beat them to proof of stake, which they did not. And but again, none of this is criminal.
He also said it was going to be a capped supply. at the beginning, and then when they forked, it was a inflationary. So technically, everybody got like their pulse sacrifice got. Well, I mean, it's being diminished by the validators, right? Like the validators are going to print more coin than the people that sacrifice now.
Well, maybe, but the whole thing is couched in this, and this is what we've got to keep in mind. It was, this is what my vision would be if we can do it. I can't tell you how many times I heard him say, we're lucky this stuff works at all. And anytime he made anything about a forward-looking statement, it was always couched in, this is what's happened in the past. In fact, there's a tremendous misquote in the SEC assertion. It's not even a misquote. It's lying by omission. What they did is they took everything out of context. So I can give you the quote if I've got it right here. Oh, here we go. Item 58. The complaint alleges on August 1st, 2021, via a YouTube video that he posted during the Pulse Chain offering, Hart claimed that a 14,000x is a reasonable estimate for what could be possible for Pulse because what Ethereum did, and this is a very similar thing but better. Okay, now even then, he's saying this is what Ethereum did, and this is a similar thing but better. But here's what they left out, okay? Anyone watching that would hear him say the following, okay, I don't make forward-looking price statements, but I will tell you what's possible. When I said that Hex was designed to do a 10,000x when it was invented, it was because I just looked at what Ethereum did. Ethereum did a 10,000x, and we have superior game theory, so it was just a reasonable estimate of what was possible. Well, if Ethereum did a 14,000x, which it has so far, why can't something that's better do a 14,000x? And so I think a 14,000x is a reasonable estimate for what could be possible for Pulse, because that's what Ethereum did, and this is a very similar thing, but better. So is that a probabilistic statement of what is a likelihood of this happening? No. Is this a timing statement about when it might occur? Not really. I mean, I can tell you that Ethereum did its 10,000x in about 2.5 years, and its 14,000x, I guess, took maybe 6 years. So they're not forward-looking price statements, but they are statements as to what is possible. And similar statements have seemed to have worked out rather persistently for Hex. Now, that's a quote. And notice all the disclaimers woven in there and the actual forward-looking price statement that the SEC is trying to put forward is actually a backward-looking price statement. So I just don't see where this guy did anything illegal. And speech is precious, man. This is getting more and more precious all the time. And by the way, I believe that a lot of people like me, sure, we had maybe some hope something nice might happen, but we gave our money expecting it to be gone. If Richard wanted to use it for whatever the hell he wanted to use it for, we considered it a sacrifice. And I know that's true because a whole bunch of people hurt themselves when more than 2,000 addresses raised $27 million for the SENS Foundation, which meant that they got 25% less crypto. And somebody can say, yeah, but they got a tax write-off. But guess what? It's better to have more crypto and have more wealth and pay some money in taxes than to get less. So a lot of people on principle over anything else chose to take less. And by the way, at the point of both of these sacrifices, there were millions of crypto coins you could have chosen, but they chose this with a sacrifice. I say the SEC kind of has no case.
I mean, that's a strong analysis, and I think the point that like we're trying to make that was really poignant. Both, you know, Cleo arguing that this is horrible and Richard Hart's a bad guy, and Danny, that was very cogent to argue that, you know, the nuance of it. I think the point here is that it's not as slam dunk as crypto Twitter makes it out to be. You know, I'm generally someone who's fading crypto Twitter. It's very sensationalist, mostly a bunch of like kind of, you know, I'm in it and I'd like to say I'm not a loser and I have a life. But I think crypto Twitter is mostly like a bunch of losers that have no lives, that are degenerate gamblers, that are harnessing their degeneracy. Instead of going to a casino and betting on sports, they're doing the risk adjusted thing and betting on crypto where they could get 100x instead of a 2x. But they're mostly a bunch of idiots and highly sensationalizing. And I don't think the Richard Hart case is so slam dunk for the government. I think there's a lot of points to be made that Danny has made, and as well as the other people here. But then to Cleo's point, like, what about all the watches and all that nonsense? And that's kind of more what drives everybody crazy.
To that point, I'll even admit that, but there's nothing illegal about being a watch whore. If that's how the guy wants to spend his money, he's a U.S. citizen. We are free to burn our money in the streets if we want to. And the other point that I would make is that people that are getting harmed, if we look at the Ripple case, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but more than 3,000 affidavits were filed as amicus friend of the court briefs. And the judge that ruled against Ripple noted that in her final opinion. And so I will hope that when the petition for the Hex people comes around, that they will stand up and say, if we are victims of anything, we are victims of the SEC. Because look what the SEC wants to do. Specifically,
I think it's funny, that whole lawsuit, because like the way it reads, it's like they're shaming him because he spent money. And if Richard is the person that Richard says he is, he's just going to walk in there and be like, look, I mined Bitcoin back in the day. I sold Bitcoin at the top. Here's the Bitcoin I sold. Here's when I mined it. And here's what I did with it. So go fuck yourself.
Right, exactly.
It won't have a leg to stand on. You know what I mean?
If you go to item 10, if you go to item 10 of the complaint, it says to protect the public. They want to protect the public from further harm and fraudulent activity. So guess what they want? They seek permanent injunctive relief, disgorgement of ill-gotten gains, plus prejudgment interest and civil penalties before the case even gets off the ground. Now, what is the history of the SEC paying out to quote unquote victims? Almost nothing. They put it in their coffers so they can chase more people because Congress won't give them an increase in their budget because they suck so bad. So I think the people that have a real case and that need to file amicus briefs, and I'm kind of working on it right now, it's tough going, but I think we all need to sign that and say, look, we are victims because the price dumped 40% within an hour. I think that's right. Maybe somebody can correct me, of the filing of the SEC case against Richard.
Yeah, it hasn't recovered.
Yeah,
I mean, it was it was like basically at the same rate for PLS, and I think it's still down 60% from the SEC.
Oh, so it's 60%, Gary, that dumped?
Oh, it dumped down to, I mean, like over the course of a few days, it dumped down to like 37 or something like that. Yeah, so it dumped like 60%.
37% of what it was prior to the case starting, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So if you want to file an amicus brief, and to everybody in the space who's kind of unaware as to what an amicus brief is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's basically someone who doesn't have a direct interest in the case. So nor the SEC nor Richard Hart, but essentially an outsider filing their opinion on the matter on this case. And if you're going to file an amicus brief, I can't stress enough how important it is to have essentially respected people from like real world society, not like crypto, Twitter, lunacy, but like real world people, ideally like a legal scholar from some eminent institution or whatever, or as good as you could get to sign on to it, because the judge really takes these things into consideration. And the more that you could operate in the real world and people aren't being harmed, and that there's, all these elite people that do good things for society that are saying, look, this is government overreach, this person is actually doing good stuff, the better off it could be. So if you're truly working on an amicus brief, the Hexagon community is great, but it would carry significant weight if you could get, prominent people from society to sign on to that, because it's real life with the judge. It's not, crypto, Twitter, situation.
Noted. If there are any securities or crypto lawyers listening right now, I am looking for a good one. And I think you make a good point. And then I'll also point out that the 3,000 plus affidavits that were filed in the Ripple case were victims that said that, they didn't buy anything directly from Ripple, and the price of their security was being harmed by the SEC. And the judge took note of that. But at the same time, there have been law professors and everybody else that have weighed in. So I think that's a great idea. And if anyone knows a great attorney, because a lot of them are scared because of the fraud allegations, which I think are just ridiculous. But anyway, I'm still looking for one that could handle the actual amicus. I'm just working right now on a petition to support it. But yeah.
So the fraud allegations are interesting because I think the fraud is the manipulation of the price of Hex. Is that correct?
It's hard to say. They're all over the place, but that's one of the things they may be alleging. And I would allege that given the situation, if Richard was not personally profiting, then I don't think it's any different than a stock buyback. But again, that's a security. This is a commodity. So I don't know.
But even if it is a security, right, it's now sufficiently decentralized, in my opinion. And then what I push back on is I believe for fraud, you have to show intent. You have to show intent to deceive, essentially, what's going on. And if they show, okay, Richard, you did buy and sell all these coins and you're a horrible person, but what if he says, I love Hex and I wanted to buy these coins because I love Hex and I think it's the future of everything, and Satoshi kept 1 million coins because he thought it was the future and I wanted to acquire as much as I possibly could. So you have to show intent on that matter. I think, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I don't think you can commit fraud with negligence. I think you have to show intent. So,
and not only that, what he did turned out to be really good for the community and probably detrimental to the party that ran up the price because they were buying more at market. So I just don't see the fraud there.
Can you comment if anybody has experience with the Hunt case? If anybody watched, I guess the Eddie Murphy movie back in the 80s was kind of about the Hunts, but it was they were brothers that were very wealthy and they cornered the silver market. So even though silver is a commodity, not considered a security, they were controlling a high percentage. And I think even Warren Buffett at the time, or maybe a long time ago, held quite a bit of silver, and there's speculation about being forced to disgorge that much ownership. Is there anything related to that if it is determined to be a commodity versus controlling all of the orange juice or a high percentage of orange juice, versus this currency question? And then the other thing to follow with is, I lay this squarely on the SEC not making determination since 2015 or maybe even earlier. If Ethereum raised money in the form of Bitcoin in order to fund the foundation to create the product of software called Ethereum, and it launched basically 2 years after that raise, I think it was called Frontier at the time, as far as its software release, with no products, no endpoints of value, simply the infrastructure to create new tokens and coins and contracts. That's 2015, man. That's a long time ago. And, it is in a lot of ways frustrating, especially for people that have financial or brand energy or time involved in this ecosystem, whether it's all as broad as crypto or specific as Richard Hart products. But it has been 7 years. Where does the gray go away? Where is there clarity? You have people like Patrick Henry, you have Tom McClellan, I think his name, I can't remember his name, but he's another Congress guy. And you even have people like Ron Paul and Rand Paul and things like that for many years saying we need clarity on these things called tokens, these cryptocurrencies. We call them loosely cryptocurrencies, even though they go down 85% and they go up 10,000x. That is not a currency. These are speculative instruments at best. And what's interesting is the monies, if you want to call them monies, if you want to call them, I have 100 oranges and I'm going to give them to this common bucket, and they can sit in the warehouse and rot in the form of a sacrifice. Okay, you no longer have the oranges. Someone else does, and they chose to let them rot. If they decided to plant a grove and grow more oranges, that's up to them as well, right? Because you are basically making a trade, a barter trade. And so even when I think it was said that there was $400 million, if you were to calculate it in points, that was hex in the form of these pulse chain and pulse X sacrifices. And even those hex have, as far as I'm aware, on chain, not been sold or not been moved or something along those lines. They still have the other things were transformed into stable coins, and they sit, in the form of DAI on chain. So the idea that $400 million could have come out into the marketplace for a buying appetite, people that love hex so much that they're willing to buy $400 million more of it is ludicrous. It got points. There was not enough liquidity for $400 million to exit. There is this L1 chain, as people like it or don't. There is a DEX that exists, whether people like it or don't. But these things have been delivered to the marketplace to value them as they choose. And again, I lay this squarely on the SEC or any other CFTC or any other entity that has languished in not making clarity. Even Gensler cannot say Ethereum absolutely is a security or is not a security long after other previous secretaries have made some kind of commentary. Like, we need actual
but
clarity.
now you're getting into politics.
Yes.
When you do that, you're getting into politics of the matter. And like politicians, government agencies, they're scumbags and morons. They're not the elite people in the field. When was the last time you saw a rocket scientist politician?
Yeah, it is wild when you start getting into the politics of things. And
They're-
yeah, I just wanted
what they're beholden to is this Citizens United case, which is Supreme Court case that merges free speech and money, really for the first time. It kind of codifies it into the history of America, freedom of speech, cryptography, forever. And it's the lobbyists that control everybody now. So when you get into the politics angle of it there, I don't think we have much to win on that angle, because the U.S. government, whether it's Democrat or Republican, now I find it spectacular, fantastical that the Republican Party is now pro-crypto. Like, give me a break. Like, the Trump administration hated crypto. The Obama administration hated crypto. It's hated. The U.S. government will never want to give up power,
Well, I will say shout out to the U.S. government. I appreciate where I live, and also just wanted to bring up the four freedoms: freedom of fear and want, freedom of speech and religion. 1941 Teddy Roosevelt speech there. Let's get to Fidgetal here, and then move it around the horn. I know I've kind of been slacking here as a co-host, but yeah, let's get to some of these hands.
Well, you took one topic and then bled it into like 15 topics, but I'll respond to the one that came top of mind, which is most people are doing themselves a disservice to try to define the thing as the thing. What's been meaning it's a security or it's a commodity or it's a currency. Until there is static regulation congressionally passed that gives us clarity, by virtue of the fact that there are different judges making decisions, not a lot of case law, and as we saw in the Ripple case, if you read carefully, the automatic sales was not deemed a security, was largely based on the fact that the SEC just didn't plead properly, and so you're going to have so much conflicting case law. People are going to be relying on that Ripple case, even though it's not, officially, it's kind of dicta at the moment. The case isn't fully completed, but it's on record. And I won't go into a full legal explanation of what dicta is versus precedent and so on. These things are likely to be considered on a case-by-case basis. And so we sit there, and that's what a lawyer's job is, right? To try to interpret intent. Intent is the hardest thing to prove, but also the easiest thing for a good lawyer to push around one way or the other. It will depend on the same thing that has failed everybody. So the government has failed us by not putting in black and white letter law. The SEC has failed by thinking that they could enforce by litigation and then not actually litigate and just try to get what they usually do, which is settlements and try to make faux law, right? Like They settled. They didn't admit guilt, but because they settled, therefore it's illegal. We failed by buying into the Ponzi's, making Ponzi's, fraud as well. It's not just securities, as well as not taking the time to educate the same people that we blamed for not making clear laws. So there's blame all around. The only true defining of it, there's already laws that govern most of the stuff. We just say it doesn't apply so that people can take advantage of other people. There will be case law. I mean, there will be legislation passed soon, thankfully, in part because of the EU pushing MiCA and such. The US will just have to carry on. But if anything, we suffer from a lack of education and a pathological dependency on greed. So at the end of the day, I blame us more than anybody else. Sorry for the rant.
But that's how all industries kind of start. You know, it took them 10 years to require a seatbelt. You know, how many people died in that time?
Shout out Oval.
To your point, Fidgetal, can you go in a little bit deeper that the SEC in the XRP case did not do the pleading correctly? That was very interesting.
So what you're seeing right now from the SEC is they didn't sue Ethereum, which would probably have been easier than Ripple. They thought they were going to play the regular game, which is go to settlement, and that would be able to create their quote unquote precedent. But I think Ripple spent $200 million on legal, if I'm not mistaken, which I don't think they expected. And whether they got case law that will stick, my humble opinion is that it won't. But regardless, even if those decisions get overturned because they were somewhat based on a lack of facts, what I meant is you guys are sitting here arguing about the intent of the issuer and the intent of the purchaser. So the format of the Howey test is, people like to go into the whole contract thing. That's pretty much settled. These are all investment contracts. There's no full corners of a document necessary or the basics of an offer acceptance consideration are kind of presumed at the moment. And then the question is expectation of profits, and most importantly, where that expectation comes from. So in the Ripple case, what the judge determined is on the programmatic sales portion, secondary market. She did rule that the direct sale to the public is a securities violation. That should be of no shock to anybody.
Wait,
Ethereum would have been.
Are you sure about
Yes.
that? I thought that
Yes.
was direct sales to institutional buyers, not the public,
That is
but institutional buyers.
that as well. That was the interesting part. What was interesting there is they actually used the idea of sophisticated investors, the fact that there were holdbacks and cliffs and tranches, as an indication. What we would think is consumer protection, right? You buy at below market price, but you have to hold, and there's tranches. We look at that as good, right? Because in a tokenomics perspective, it is. It allows some sort of window for retail to not get absolutely devastated by dumping. But the court looked at that and said, well, that's clearly an indication that they knew that these were speculative investments and they weren't buying currency. You don't have a place to go and buy dollars at 80 cents on the dollar from the US directly. Well, for the most part. What the judge said is that the secondary market people who are buying essentially peer-to-peer or off of exchanges, right, they didn't believe that the Ripple's marketing arm, which they quoted, they quoted what's the marketing tactics, how are we going to present value, they had a whole breakdown of the marketing portion. They said that the SEC didn't provide enough evidence that the people who were buying a secondary market weren't necessarily buying it as a currency. And even if they were buying it for speculation, that they weren't basing those decisions on the expectation of profits off the promises or representations of Ripple Core. And they basically said that SEC just didn't plead enough. So the SEC had aggregated or does aggregate, right? So you don't litigate facts in appellate court. So they won't be supplying the facts there, although much like any court, you can't expect that those data points, a lot of those data points and facts are going to be coming out in the next phase of this court case. The last causes of action against the individuals that are still left, which makes me believe they might just settle that. It'll depend. I think if the appellate courts grant the interlocutory appeal, the appeal pre-finalization of the underlying state case, I believe that will determine whether they settle the rest of the cases. I am of the belief that they won't grant it. And then I think Ripple will, if they know that an interlocutory is not going to be approved, they're going to drag the fuck out of the state case. So as much case law can be built off of the what I would call lucky existing case law. But if it goes wherever it goes, either an interlocutory appeal or the post judgment appeal to the appeals courts, I don't think they'll win on it per se, but I think it'll be kicked down. At which point the SEC will provide. This is, of course, if the legislature hasn't, the Congress hasn't passed laws by then, which is that's all we're dealing with now is the balance between the court cases and legislation, and God knows what happens there. But when it comes back to the state to the lower courts, the SEC is going to go, okay, here's proof. We polled 5,000 secondary sales purchasers of XRP, and we asked them, did you buy this to use it and send money in remittances globally, or were you buying it because you hoped or believed it would go up in price? And God knows they're going to take 5,000 of the ones that said that we all know, which is we heard about Ripple from a friend. That friend heard about it from a marketing or Facebook, and that glimmer of hope that we got in terms of secondary market exclusion to securities violations might go away. That was a ramble. I'm sorry.
So that was a lot. Very interesting. Let's try to synthesize it down as percentages. So I'm just going to start off objectively. I would say 75% of federal cases that are appealed by the loser are not won on appeal, meaning that the case, is kind of etched into federal case law forever. You think it's going to actually be the 25% and it will get overturned on appeal?
Yes, because it's not a fair. It's not PvP, right? It's not regular players with regular defendant. It's the SEC that has a lot more to lose or gain, and a judge that is going to be very careful on what decisions they make. And more often than not, in smaller cases, the appellate courts want to not shake up the shit, and usually defer to the lower courts' judgment. That's why that number is that high. But in a case like this that has such magnificent rippling potentials, no pun intended, which is one of the main basis for the SEC's request for an interlocutory appeal, I would be of the notion, just like I think it won't get approved interlocutory appeal because it would just make it messy. I think the same way, I think the appellate court will go, really want to make much of a decision here. Seems like your analysis could be a little wonky. What's the harm in sending it back?
I also heard a lawyer was saying that they could technically, the SEC could technically lose the case because they didn't do any paperwork within the 4 years that they have to do their due diligence on whatever company they're trying to investigate.
I would not. I would veer away from procedural issues being used as the governing decisive factors in any of these. It's too big.
So I'm going to take the other side and say that I think it will be upheld. I don't think the appeal will be successful. The way I read the case, and I don't think I read it as detailed as you did, I just skimmed it. But the way I read it was that the secondary sales are not securities. And I know that there is case law out there that basically says that the Howey test does not apply to the secondary market, but only applies to essentially the ICO or the IPO, or you giving money, the public giving money to a centralized entity, and then that centralized entity is then charged with making those shares or those assets that were given out in exchange for the money more valuable. And
here's the problem. Here's the problem that you're going to run into. You're going to run into the Ben.eth problem or Bencoin problem, which is then foreign nationals, non-U.S. citizens could then launch a token, right? And then U.S. citizens could then just buy that project up, right? In theory. I don't see that as a viable outcome.
well, that's exactly how Coinbase does all their listings. Essentially, the ICO happens internationally, and then the listing goes on Coinbase. And then, you know, that's basically how the whole industry is operated since the advent of Ethereum. You have an ICO internationally, you exclude US citizens, and then eventually it lists on Coinbase. And because there was no the public did not give the U.S. public did not, in theory, give the money to the ICO team. Therefore, it's not a security, and that's basically like the legal strategy that Coinbase has used over the years.
Yeah, they're in the middle of a lawsuit.
Well, yeah, of course they're in a lawsuit, but yes, hold on. Yes, they're in a lawsuit, but there's a lot of lawsuits. You know, in America, you know, anybody can sue anybody. Coinbase is a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company that
so here's the reality. The reality is,
but hold on, please don't cut me off. They were also approved to IPO by the same agency that is now suing them, and they also have amicus briefs from very elite institutional people throughout the U.S., and they also have, you know, unlimited budget to spend on legal, as did XRP. So if that's the strategy of the industry, basically what you're saying is, and this is where the reason why I don't think it's going to happen is the judges, federal judges are pretty smart. They're not like loser lawyers that work for the SEC that can't defeat XRP, and they're not morons on crypto Twitter. They're pretty smart people. The judge, if they say that
was like a double dig, by the way. I appreciate it.
Yeah, if the judge says that secondary sales are securities, the whole industry dies. Literally, the entire industry dies. Coinbase is illegal. Gemini is illegal. Every single exchange in America is illegal. And all these things are securities. And like, you know, pack it up, boys. I hope you cashed out some. Everyone go get a job. So that's kind of the other side to that. Is the judge going to destroy the industry that's 10 years old, that there's institutional money behind? Maybe.
No,
but
they
I don't
won't.
think so.
They won't for a couple basic reasons. One, somebody rightfully pointed out Citizens United. Citizens United just solidified the fact that there are no real politics, right? Those are just we have PFPs, we have NFTs as PFPs. That's what politicians are for big money. Big money is making every decision, period. Citizens United just made it easier. The reality is BlackRock and other, you know, BlackRock basically runs the world, are coming into the space. So reasonably thinking, right? And human capital, human equity, and financial equity and capital is fleeing and will continue to flee the country until there is some sort of clarity, and that's legislative. So all we're seeing right now is a bunch of rumble, humble marketing basically by the SEC and by the projects till we get legislation. And we might get one or two more rulings here and there. They'll be appealed. It'll all be murky. It's good for us because then you can say, hey, I followed the XRP ruling. I did it just like that did. What I suggest and what I'm taking initiative and I'll end is I'm starting a project that's a charity that's going to fund declarative judgment motions for projects. So I say, instead of waiting for them to come to us, we help people file motions for declarative judgment and flood the courts, basically making the SEC and making the courts have to make decisions. That's the only way to force the legislation that is necessary for business clarity.
If I could interject, that's exactly what happened in the Ripple case. The attorney was John Deaton, who filed the amicus brief, but he didn't file it as one brief. He filed it as 3,700 plus briefs. The judge kind of freaked out and said, I can't allow this in, but I will allow you, Mr. Deaton, to have a seat at the table. And the SEC was pissed. As a matter of fact, John has said that what happened was that they tried to have him dismissed. He had written something on Twitter, made a little parody of the SEC with, I don't know, some gangsters and everything, and they got pissed. It was clearly a joke, but they even brought that up. And of course, the judge told them to put on their big boy pants. But we cannot underestimate in this case the power of everybody that's been harmed by things like the loss of Uniswap, the loss of OKX, and of course the harm to our price. We can't ignore that, and I hope every Hexagon and Pulsicon will sign this amicus brief petition when it's ready. And I hope to have it ready sooner rather than later, so that by time Richard finally does answer the complaint, maybe we have at least 3,000 to 5,000 signers, because that's a lot. They have at least one victim. Who knows? Maybe it's Cleo. I don't know if he's in the state of New York, but whatever.
Yeah. The previous statement, I think, was from Fidgetal. He's starting a company to flood the courts. That's very interesting, and that could be actually quite iconic, because it's very difficult for a regular person to pay for a good lawyer and to bring suit in court. You basically have to have at least like 100,000 in legal fees, for every like year or two you're doing litigation. And like, it's hard enough living. Like, how many people can really afford that? Really only the Deca millionaire class, which is way less than 0.1% of the population. Really appreciate everybody's input. I think there's a few more people that want to come on stage. I can't stress enough the XRP case and what that means.
And by the way, Luke, just my last little piece before I'm shut up. I believe that Richard Hart is the last. This is my prediction. He's the last pawn smoke screen for the SEC to hide the fucking debacle of Coinbase. Because if Ripple could spend 200 mil, Coinbase will go to fucking war, and it has the fact that it went public. Right? They can't afford that. I think Richard Hart goes to jail as a sign of force to show that not only is it civil, but there's criminal shit here, and then we get to legislation.
Well, yeah. So that's essentially what holding Pulse and Hex and Pulse X is. It's a call option on Richard Hart not going to jail, because, let's just look at the percentages, right? Maybe the XRP's case gets overturned, but if you're just going purely on an arithmetic, quantitative actuarial table model, probably not going to get overturned, and it's going to at least be the law of the land for the next year or two, right? But
5 years.
Yeah, so it might be the law of land for during the whole time of this Richard Hart case. So that's and 75% chance that the appeal is not going to be overturned. I understand the arguments that it will, and what the hell? They couldn't prove XRP was security. Mind blowing that they couldn't. So, but it's the federal judge has now written this in ink. Then, so that's good. That would go in the check. If you were separating the case for good, not good for Richard Hart and the Hexagons, that goes on the side of good. Good stuff for the Hexagons. Next is,
sorry. Let's go to we got Brandon, and then we'll go to DeZeus.
Yep. Hey guys, I want to start off by saying thanks for bringing Cleo on, because I, for one, feel much more reassured knowing that that's kind of the quality of the opposition we're facing here. I mean, host, you gave the guy several attempts to clarify as to what his beef is with Richard Hart, and the only thing I was able to hear from him is that he accused Richard Hart of being charismatic. I mean, if I convince you that blue is better than red, you can make the case that I manipulated you into believing that blue is better than red. So anyways, I didn't, given 5 minutes, the guy couldn't define what his problem was with Richard Hart.
Well,
so I kind of feel a little better.
Hold on. He lost money. That's his problem. He lost money. Which is a valid point. People
no, but I did not hear him say that. I heard you saying that on his behalf. All I heard from him is that Richard Hart was charismatic and has opinions. I heard you say that.
Well, hang on. Let's just slow it down there, but I totally get where you're coming from, and yeah, appreciate that. But yeah, let's go to DS real quick. Yeah, Cleo's an interesting guy. I can't put my finger on him. He's part of the Zen community, and he's interesting, but he's a human. So I guess let's just be a little bit more understanding of people that lose money in the space or
And
everything
just
above. We don't know people's lives, right? So.
before we move on, I also want to put another good thing in the checkbox of the hexagons is that usually, and Fidgetal, I would like you to argue with this if you can. I don't think you can though. Usually, when a criminal case is brought in financial markets, especially crypto, like if you look at Machinsky, Do Kwon, it's brought in conjunction with the SEC case, and the criminal case is brought usually when there's a bunch of people with pitchforks that want to burn the person at the stake. With Theyre and Celsius, there were a lot of people, with pitchforks. With this case, I don't see a lot of pitchforks. And more importantly, I would say potentially most importantly, argument for it's unlikely that a criminal case will be brought. I understand the potential for a criminal case. There was no criminal case brought in parallel with the SEC suit. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's been a time in crypto where the SEC has brought a case and then a criminal case came later. I want to be corrected on that. And I think this is kind of the most important thing for the community to look at is what is the percentage of times the SEC's brought a case and then a criminal case came later. It did not come in parallel with it. And I'm betting that more than 90% of the time, potentially 100, but as a lawyer, I don't like speaking in absolutes. So 90%, if you get like a 90 in school, you get like an A minus. So A minus percentage of the time, a criminal case is never brought if it's not brought in parallel with the SEC.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And DS, you've been quite hitting that emoji button there for a minute there. I am the law, Judge Dredd X, LA.
Yeah.
What's going on? How are you?
What's going on, everyone? Loving the conversation. I'm not too familiar with who we're name dropping here, but it sounds like people are passionate. So let's keep the conversation going. Love it.
Yeah, I mean we're here for Richard Hart conversation. So yeah, let's go back to Brandon B. I didn't mean to cut you off there. And
I would really want to see if anybody has an example though of a criminal case being brought not in conjunction with an SEC case.
Brandon, the answer will likely be how Richard Hart plays ball. So they file these civilly because they want to make a point. This is a dance. This is not real law happening. They don't want real law to happen because they don't want case law. So what you're looking at is a dance. So Ripple played the dance like a fucking G. And that's why the SEC got the worst fucking news they could ever get, which is case law and case law against them. And by the way, if you had half a brain, you would have made 100x just by understanding the basic law. And a bunch of people, so I don't give advice often, but I was literally at the World Series of Poker, and a very famous poker player was like, what's your crypto? Someone introduced me like, this is the crypto genius. I was like, I'm not a genius. Like, I'm not going to give you any advice. He's like, come on, give me some advice. And I was like, okay, my guess is that Ripple has more than enough money and is more OG and will want to make a point. And they, at this point, would have settled if it was ever going to settle. I think it's going to go to a decision. And the fact is that Ripple has the SEC by the balls because they're not going to settle unless they get relisted. And their fucking offices are in San Francisco. So what, are they going to leave the country? And I said, it's going to have a decision. And I believe it's going to go in Ripple's favor. And even if it doesn't go in Ripple's favor, there's no way, they're already delisted. So what could be the harm to the token? So I think it'll be a boon in marketing to the value price. So I said, if you're going to do anything, I would put money on Ripple. And he did. He put a very sizable amount of money. And I had forgot that I told him. And my other buddy, who's a professional poker player, hit me up and went, dude, this guy is your biggest fan forever now. And I was like, why? How much did he make? He goes, 10 figures. So,
yeah,
all I'm going to say.
It's not a bad lick there. And yeah, we'll get over to are you getting a question here? But
so simple. If he settles, which is what they want, he won't go to jail. If he puts up a fucking fight, watch criminal charges come.
For sure, and I kind of I resonate with that for sure. But that's again that's probably why he's chilling in Finland.
Wait,
He's not just Swedish, he's Finnish as
Digital,
well.
tell us your opinion on the likelihood of settlement and when it's going to come, because we have seen Richard talk about, EO settled for 24 million on raising over $1 billion. I think he understands it's in the community's best interest to settle. Is the SEC incentivized to settle, or do they want to? Because usually they want to make an example out of him, right?
They'll settle.
So,
They'll settle, and Brock for president.
what's the number they're going to settle for? Isn't it usually that they want to make an example out of him? They lost the XRP case. Richard Hart's a big joke with Gucci and Burberry and Louis Vuitton nonsense, poking
and
fun
Prada,
at everybody, making us look really stupid. Don't they want to try to extract as much as possible? Like, usually in order to settle, one side has to be winning over the other. It's a negotiation. It's a dance, as you say. So currently, except for the Hexicans, the crypto Twitter, and I'm betting crypto lobby people hate Richard Hart. They want him going down. The venture capitalists need to make all the money. They don't want a peer-to-peer group of, what they look at as pirates getting rich and destabilizing society. So isn't it that they want to really stick it to him, and they're not going to only settle until Richard Hart starts striking victories? Or do you think out of the gate, $100 million settlement is on the table?
If they settle, I didn't want to take over the space, guys, so I apologize. But if they settle, it will be for a big number. The difference between Richard Hart and every other case that's been brought so far is he pulled a Ben.eth. He flaunted it in your face, right? That's the difference here. Every other time they're below rate. Like, I bet most people can't even name who the founders of Ripple are, and they're literally named in the lawsuit you're talking about, right? People probably know Garlinghouse, so great. But Richard played the one thing that is not to his advantage, which made it possible in the first place, is he is the single point of failure, right? And that's evident through all the allegations as well. So it's a different kind of case than the other cases because optically it includes greed. Optically, it includes everything that the SEC has tried to use to make us be afraid of crypto, right? Most people, Republicans, should be down with crypto. It makes goddamn sense. Like, smaller government, you don't want people touching your money?
What if Richard goes in there and just shows receipts of him, buying all the shit with his Bitcoin he mined in 2015?
They won't give a shit.
So there's definitely a lot of what ifs. It's crazy, but like you're talking about, though, Fidgetal, it definitely is a dance. But Richard is he's definitely an interesting dancer for sure. Double entendre on that, and the way that he navigates the crypto space as well as dancing. I've seen some of his videos. One thing he's not very good at dancing with is apple cider vinegar and fruit flies, which kind of leads me to Fidgetal, and we'll probably chop this up at another time. It's probably not the place for this, but we definitely have to break down Zen. I know that you were saying that your buddies at the World Series of Poker there we're talking about you being the crypto guru and whatnot, and respectfully, Zen is the jam in and of itself. I actually the reason that I actually tapped into Zen because I was a past Hexican. And then I saw a stream with Mr. Jack Levin and Richard Hart on a Pulse Chain conference because I sacked for Pulse and Pulse X and everything else like that. I was about the free speech and freedom of movement. Fuck yeah, But then I saw Jack Levin kind of come up there, and Jack was just a cool dude. He was. He's played in the Hex community. He's definitely been an amazing, supporter of Richard, I think, early on, just for the first principle of crypto and some of those understandings. And he got on a stream with Richard, and it was just some interesting, just fruit flies and apple cider vinegar talk. It was really a lot for me, but I kind of thought Jack was a very smart dude. And I kind of saw the light there, and I was like, I think that what Zen is about is a better Hex because it's a fair launch, and there is no origin address, there is no VC funding, there is no the market supply starts at zero, so there's no team allocation or anything like that. and it's a free mint that you can get out there. It's tied to all these layer one, I believe 12 different chains now, and then we actually just launched on Base, which Fidget, I think that's where we met recently because of the friend tech malfunction, because Zenians were over there minting on Base. Because they just launched their L2, and I think that we all of their base belongs to Zenians now, but that's neither here nor there. And kind of want to just get back to the Richard Hart stuff, but Fidgetal, definitely hit me up. We'll have to break bread on the Zen tip at another time. But anyways, Brandon, and then who do we got up here? We got Silly Grandma. Silly Grandma, I've heard you in a couple of the spaces in the Hex community. I like what you have to say. We're actually going to go to you first, just because to change up the vibe in here. So how are you?
Oh, I'm doing okay, dear. I just wanted to say that the suit, it seems like the key word in it is alter ego. And I just came in on this space, so I don't know if you've already talked about that. But alter ego is a synonym for breaking the corporate ceiling. That's how it's used in law.
What do you mean by alter ego in the case brought by the SEC against Richard Hart? It mentions the word alter ego.
Yes, it says that the way they're getting, the reason they named Hex and Pulse X is they're saying Richard Hart is the alter ego for those entities. And therefore, the whole suit is against Richard Hart.
Oh, that's very interesting. I understand. You're basically saying that Hex and Pulse Chain and Pulse X and whatever else are...
alter egos for Richard is what they're saying.
Yeah, but so what Richard is going to say is that these are decentralized communities. And
well,
what they're saying is...
you got to go more than that, because when you use that term in the law, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get at people outside of the corporations, like owners, stockholders, everything else. But you have to prove there are elements. Whenever there's these kind of legal things, you have to prove certain elements. You have to prove that Richard Hart had control of the corporation, or control of the board of directors, or control of the bank account.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that, and this is what, interestingly, the SEC has not done yet, which I found strange. I thought that there would be at least one Ethereum address or Bitcoin address, a bit string where of the account that controlled the money in the complaint, and we did not see that. Perhaps that's going to come in like the next set of documents that are released. But that's effectively their argument, is that they're claiming, and I'm surprised that we didn't see it. They have done the blockchain analysis and decided that this amount of money moved to this wallet, to that wallet, to this wallet, and it was effectively controlled by Richard Hart. And Richard Hart is the grandmaster of ceremonies, manipulating the prices up and down, making these claims, what have you. But we didn't see that in the complaint yet, and they will have to prove that in open court. And I think because that they didn't have it in the complaint, they have like a gut instinct that it is him, but I don't want to say this, but my instinct tells me that because it wasn't in the papers that were initially filed, they don't have the strongest case to tie, Richard Hart, the individual, to these addresses that, moved Ethereum, stablecoin, Bitcoin, whatever around to manipulate the price of Hex or Pulse or whatever. So the fact that I love your point, actually. You're saying it's an alter ego. These things are Richard Hart, and he's the king conspiracy, behind all this. He's the manipulator. He's doing the equivalent of cornering the silver market, which is a commodity, which people, if you corner a commodities market, you can get fined. You could actually go to prison for that. They're basically accusing him of that. And in order to do that, they have to show the blockchain investigation of wallets that shows that he's controlling that. And because that wasn't in the SEC initial complaint, I'm doubtful that they have the strongest case. I think they will be able to present some case, but I think it will have holes in it, potentially by, is it proper use of cryptography to properly make your data trail private? like GDPR style, essentially allows for privacy, the right to be forgotten. So did he use his like perhaps he did do it, but why didn't they show that? Perhaps he is the alter ego, but why didn't they show that with, documented simple proof? Because the blockchain, it's very simple to track transactions. The proof should be simple. Let's see it, SEC. Let's see the proof. And if it is, perhaps you got them. But if it isn't, why didn't you show it? I really love that point you made there.
A lot of people don't like to show. It's all for show, but a lot of people don't like to show. But when Richard brings on the showmanship, it gets people going. So we're going to see.
No, I mean show as in essentially show us the 0x Ethereum addresses that the SEC alleges he used to manipulate the price of Hex. Perhaps he did do it. Perhaps he did not. That's for the court to decide. And in order to show them that he did do that, the blockchain would simply show, as a blockchain does, money was moved from here to here to here. These assets were bought and sold, because of the timing of it and who owns what. It was manipulation. But why weren't they able to essentially put in the complaint those addresses, essentially the blockchain Chainalysis investigation? There it is. I said the company's name that leads the world in blockchain investigations. Why can't they show the Chainalysis investigation of the funds moving from wallet to wallet to wallet, buying these assets? Why haven't they shown that yet if it was so slam dunk? That's my question.
For sure.
And that's where I think the previous speaker, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. The
Silly
alter
grandma.
ego question. Who was it? I'm sorry.
Silly grandma.
Silly grandma. Excellent point. The alter ego. And why didn't they show that to us? And there are elements that they will have to prove. And I believe those are the elements that this is the trail of money. He bought and sold at these prices at these times, moved it from this wallet to this wallet. But they just accuse that. And they don't show the actual 0x addresses, which I find.
Yeah, they need to show it, and I guess I was just playing on the double entendre there with the word show. But hey, we're running a show here, and I think we got a couple hands. I just wanted to shout out to Glutathione for holding this space, and make sure you guys are getting your glutathione out there. I know that there's a lot of different fruits and vegetables. He's a big proponent of the host here is a big proponent of telling people about glutathione. So avocado, watermelon, oranges, strawberries, go ahead and get that natural glutathione in you. And yeah, let's get to these hands here. We got Brandon B, and then we got Happy Healer.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe add on top of what you said. Guys, it's been a great space so far. I want to thank you for having this space and sharing your thoughts and allowing me to come up here and ask questions. I was hoping to get perhaps a point of a clarification, if you have anything to add on this, as to what is the standard of burden of proof on a case like this? Because it's my understanding that it's different from criminal to private. So could you clarify that as to like what is the standard of burden of proof?
Such a good question. So in criminal law, like Donald Trump indicted, whatever, in criminal law, you have to have the entire jury, all 12 people, generally it's 12 people, unanimously basically vote 12-0 that you're guilty of whatever your crime is. That's criminal law, right?
Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, all that. This is civil law. So this is 51%, right? So you need to get 51%. And correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody feel free to come up and tell me I'm wrong.
Preponderance of evidence.
Correct. So this is civil law is 51%. So the SEC will have to show by a preponderance of the evidence 51% that he's guilty, whereas criminal law is more like, I would say, 99%. This is 51%. And although it's much easier than criminal law, they risk going to a jury and losing. So no one ever wants to go to jury, because then you're just putting the fate of effectively whatever it is that's at stake in the hands of 12 strangers that could be a bunch of lunatics. And, they make movies about this. You strategically file suit in certain counties and certain cities, if you're a plaintiff's lawyer for people that are injured, you want to file in a jurisdiction that, the jurors historically vote in favor of the person that's injured and give large judgments out. Whereas if you're a large corporation, you want to be defended by a jurisdiction that really respects large corporations. And in that is a whole spectrum of things that can occur. Unfortunately, the SEC has brought in suit in New York, which is a very anti-crypto place. But then you get an amazing decision by a judge in the XRP case that's very crypto friendly. So it could really go any which way. And imagine the SEC loses this case. The jury, for whatever reason, says Richard Hart is not guilty. Imagine what would happen in crypto land. So it looks like, in my opinion, yeah, imagine, right? I think that would be the end of like financial agency law forever. Like you couldn't prove Ripple was guilty. You couldn't prove Coinbase was guilty. You couldn't prove Richard Hart was guilty. So not that these things have to happen, but the SEC has to imagine that world. They basically destroy securities laws for every human ever, forever, because of this short period of time in history. You know, this 3, 4 year, 5 year period of time in history where they couldn't win a case. And that sets precedent for the next 100 years. So if you're the SEC, you don't want to go to jury. You want to settle. And
glutamine, they won with library. Don't forget.
It's glutathione.
Sorry, glutathione. They won with the library. They won cripplingly with the library case right before the Ripple case.
Oh, yeah. But the library case, you know, very, very small shit coin, could not afford the legal bills. That's why they won, because library was a shit coin that didn't have millions and millions to spend on legal. Ripple, Coinbase, hundreds of millions to spend on legal.
Glutathione, for some reason, they are asking for a jury trial. I don't know why, other than I'm imagining Richard being at his most ostentatious and they want to show that video, but they are demanding that.
Yeah. But to get to a jury trial takes years. The XRP case started in 2020 and it's 2023. Still hasn't even gotten to the jury. That was just a judge making a law. So that stuff, that's going to take forever. And the SEC has to weigh, Jesus, what if we lose to XRP, Coinbase, DCG, and, you know, the most craziest of them all, Richard Hart. And now we have set case law for the next 100 years that anyone could be defrauded by anyone, crypto, bunch of scammers, bunch of pirates, fraudsters, manipulators, as Gensler said in that stupid video. They reign supreme. Their case law is now like indefensible. It's a renaissance. They're all the new billionaires. They could pay for whatever lawyer they want. It's a global take-all. It's literally what might be the end of society if Richard Hart wins this case. And they lost to XRP. And Richard Hart might have Richard Hart might be a billionaire, you know?
So in other words, you're so an interesting way of saying that the request for a jury trial is really just a way to string this out and maybe get a judgment and settlement from Richard of some sort.
I don't think there's any way it doesn't settle, because the risk, they lost to 75% chance, I believe, the XRP case won't be overturned. And that's not even my opinion. That's just based on the facts of the matter, is that 75% of cases on appeal are upheld. They're not rejected.
Okay.
So you're
XRP is good to go, which means
you're saying I'm able to mint Zen on Pulse Chain still?
could do whatever you want with Zen. You can mint it wherever you want.
So glutathione, I did
yeah,
try
I
and
like
send you.
hearing that. Hey, Danny, real quick, we had a couple hands here. I really appreciate you
Fair enough.
chiming in. Let's get to Happy Healer, and then we'll go over to Silly Grandma.
But the SEC has to live in that world. I just can't stress this enough. The SEC has to live in a world, because, you know, anything could happen. String theory. We live in a world where this, this Twitter space is not going on in parallel universe. So they have to explore the world. What if we lose every case because we're going against $2,000 an hour Manhattan lawyers that care so much and are exponentially better than our government lawyers who go home at 5 p.m. So what if they lose every single case and the world is taken over by crypto, and crypto billionaires have their own militias of drone armies?
I think
anything goes.
Happen. But Richard Hart, he is he's really like a flamboyant guy. We know this, right? And he's been very consistent. He's been persistent. He's continued to get this crypto legislation and rules according to the SEC. He's kept it in his mind as he went along. As he talked about crypto, he taught the community about it. We know that. He has to win this. If he doesn't, then we lose too much. For us, we need him to win this, because if he doesn't, then we lose too much. And the things where crypto is headed requires that. He was very smart. He's on the right side of this. And I'll share a couple of things with you as a lover. I'm a happy healer lover, of course. And the detractors, he offered to debate all of them. He was confident. Richard Hart is about doing something big. And this community is also about doing something big. You were just talking about changing the world. I agree. That's exactly the kind of world I have a vision of myself. Absolutely. Rest assured.
Happy, are you minting Zen? Is that why you're feeling good?
Huh?
Are you minting Zen? Is that why you're feeling so
Yeah, I'm always feeling good because I have love and God, and I'm so happy about the future. But I wanted to share.
Let's try to keep it objective.
Very objective. I want to say something. The future lies in the human blockchain. That's what this is about, which is essentially the cryptocurrency represents, right?
It sounds like the next.
They're making a legal argument.
Yes, they're probably in between or something like that. But
If it weren't,
I think the ideology and what Richard stands for, I think, is if he's able to put his own ego in the back seat, from my understanding, it definitely could have went a lot further. But also that ego made him. So it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic there.
Community, if it didn't adhere to safe blocks, this isn't too.
Everybody's talking too much.
Let's get to these hands. So Silly Grandma, go ahead.
So on that, Richard Hart is really the horse you rode in on. Jimmy Iovine, who's like the most famous music producer of all time, one of his musicians wasn't doing so well. And I think it was actually their Beats by Dre. Beats by Dre. Apple bought Beats by Dre for something like over $1 billion. And before the deal closed, Dr. Dre leaked the deal, and they took off like several $100 million off of it. And they asked Jimmy Iovine, why are you sticking with this? This is a mess. The guy just cost you $100 million because of his antics. And you know what he said? He says, this is the horse I rode in on. I mean, you entered the arena because of this man. Perhaps you lost money, perhaps you made money, but this is why you entered the arena. And the stakes have never been higher. And we'll see what happens. But this is the horse you rode in on. It could go either way. And because it could go either way, I think the government has a lot more to lose, which would then facilitate discussions of a settlement. And I think it's in everybody's best interest to settle, including Richard. I think it would be best for the community to then unlock the treasury. And that's the key thing. That's the key thing. The treasury needs to be unlocked for the community, allow the community to thrive, build things, make things better, permissionless, first principles of crypto all the way. And that's what would really kind of heal the whole situation. Litigation, no one ever wants to be in litigation. It could go on for years. Settle.
I disagree.
Silly Grandma, before you go, I just want to say this real quick. I totally kind of get your analogy there as far as the horse you rode in on and everything like that. Well, if Richard is the horse that I rode in on, then if Richard Hart is the horse I rode in on, then Jack Levin is the spacecraft.
Can I make a point? You can't just file a suit without any basis whatsoever. A lawyer has a legal due diligence requirement to put something in his complaint that shows a basis. So this can be dismissed very quickly with a motion to dismiss, because there's nothing in the complaint. There's no substance in the complaint whatsoever.
You're extremely wrong about that. I disagree with you 110%. That's absurd.
Well, let me tell you how I'm seeing it.
200%.
You can't say that there's no substance in this complaint. You cannot. People lost lots of money. Pulse Chain's 2 years late. The guy goes around, flaunts diamonds. There is substance there.
Yeah.
And the argument is in the nuance.
That's it. No, you have to have some factual substance. So this is fraud upon the court, okay? Which the lawyer who filed it could lose his law license over this. And let me explain this, okay? Just first with the hex and the pulse X thing. There's no corporation. There's no foundation. There's no bank account. There's nothing that they can show that promises were made that we'd have profit. Okay, nothing. It's just a code. Hex is just a code. That's all it is. Okay, and there's no back door. There's no way of controlling it.
I have to mute you because Richard, listen, I think the Hex community is potentially a very powerful vehicle. But for you to say there's nothing there, Richard Hart has said so many times, 10,000x, 100x, whatever. Yes, maybe he qualified it in a sense of Ethereum's done a 10,000x, but he said Hex was designed to do a 10,000x. You know what? It did. And now he's saying that all my products are designed to do a 10,000x, and Pulse and Pulse Chain or PulseX are part of his product. So for you to say that there's no basis for anything, I just, there's nuances to the arguments. And I know the internet is very sensationalized and everyone wants to see this and that. And, ABC.
Well, her name is Silly Grandma, so maybe she's just being silly. I don't know. I totally
yeah, there's nuance to everything. So to say that this is fraud, like there's something happened here, all of crypto is illegal. And that's why Satoshi released it anonymously. You're not allowed to create currency to compete with the US dollar. They'll throw you in jail for that. They killed Gaddafi because he was the 10th richest man in the history of the world. Gaddafi. They killed him because they claimed he was a terrorist. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But more importantly, he tried to break the petrodollar and settle currency in euros and his own currency. So you can't do that. The crypto wars of weapons grade cryptography against the US government go back to World War II with Alan Turing, Bletchley Park. They saved all of humanity from the Nazis and then essentially made Alan Turing kill himself because he was gay, and it was illegal to be gay in England at the time. Those are both First Amendment things. Like, how ironic that they use freedom of speech, because it was also illegal to be gay in Nazi Germany. And this is why Alan Turing is not celebrated the way Einstein is, because imagine the hero of World War II was a gay guy instead of a macho, military grade industrialist. Einstein's great, but they don't teach about Alan Turing, probably because he was gay. Because what, they think everyone's going to then want to be gay? No, he's a hero.
I don't know if Alec Turing said he was gay. He might have just said it feels good.
At least bisexual.
I'm not really judging. No, I'm with you, but
he was at least bisexual, which is fine. But the irony is that freedom of speech is what saved us from the Nazis, and then freedom of expression is also freedom of speech, is what they killed him for. And then again, look at the history of PGP against Phil Zimmerman, Hal Finney, and the Clinton administration in the 90s. It was illegal to send an encrypted email outside of the U.S. And
so
that's
what's
why
really interesting about Richard, though, is like, from my understanding and just the videos that I've watched on him, like it's not like he's just some like pipsqueak, he's hanging out with like Swedish lawmakers and he's hanging out with like people in parliament for all these other different foreign countries. So it's not like he's just a nobody, and I mean it's just very interesting how the politics works, and I don't know how far his reach is, but only time will tell, but hopefully he settles and everything kind of keeps going. But
so I think he's a top 100 to 1,000 holder of crypto worldwide. So when you have that much influence, and when you have that much money, you have a lot of power and potentially a lot of influence if you want to use it properly. It's very hard to raise money for charity. Everyone tries to do it. And this man was able to raise 27 million like it was nothing. Like, that's a very hard thing to do. I haven't seen too many $27 million donations out there. So this is potentially a force. But my point to Silly Grandma, I'm sorry that I muted you, is that there's a crypto war that's been going on for almost 100 years with the cryptographers against the government. And for you to say that there's no claim in there, like, of course there's a claim. First of all, it's just illegal to make currency that competes with the US dollar, and they did it. And it got so rampant that you couldn't send people to jail. It was so big at the time. There's millions of users of cryptocurrency, so the genie's out of the bottle. So that in and of itself is per se illegal, but there's nothing you could do about it. It's like peer-to-peer torrent sharing. Like, it's used including by government workers. So, nothing in life with such high stakes is ever black and white. There's strong nuance to everything. And I found in life that betting against sensationalist headlines and, you know, from totally like when crypto Twitter went crazy, when the SEC brought the case against Richard, they were like, see, he's a scammer, he's going to jail, it's all horrible, blah, blah, blah. And then the other side, Richard Hart did absolutely nothing wrong. I mean, obviously it's somewhere in the middle, right? There's some truth on both sides. And both sides have to live in the world where a jury made up of 12 crazy people can make up some crazy decision in which they can lose 12-0. And
they don't claim it's a currency in the complaint. You have to look at the complaint. The complaint has to be sufficient. There has to be something listed in the complaint. Otherwise, it can be dismissed as an insufficient complaint. All this generalization and nonsense means nothing. The words in the complaint.
Okay. So the words in the complaint show.
Grandma, take it easy, Grandma. Take it easy.
So there's how about
we're
this?
We're here together. We're here together.
How about this? There's approximately $12 million missing from the sacrifice. They accuse him of using $12 million to spend it on diamonds. But
they didn't accuse him of promising to use that money for profit for a pool of people. I mean, they did not say that 12 million or whatever, or 1,000, whatever was promised to be used for a pool of money from people who were expecting a profit from it. They don't claim that there was any promise.
Okay, so let me argue against you.
So it's an insufficient complaint.
Well, hold on.
He has to file a motion.
Grandma, come on, Grandma.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of passion, and I'm with you. Fuck yeah, I'm with you. But let's just take it easy here.
On the other side of that, they also do say that he talked about 10,000x gains and ROI. You know, he did say those terms on video. He said ROI and 10,000x.
I think 38%, and 10,000x. That was a lot of the narrative that I was.
I mean, that's
hold on, but you know, it's tough because I mean, you can't teach people how to think, and I think that was a point earlier in the space you were kind of talking about. Just it's not illegal for people to sway people's perspectives. It happens in politics, it happens on television screen, it happens all over the place. You never know, and that's why I like. Anon Garrick's, where it's the mind is infinite and self-ruled, but that's just my ignorance speaking there.
I would agree with all you guys if it wasn't always grounded in this is what happened in the past. This is not a forward-looking statement, but every damn one of his statements that I could find always refers to the past and not a probabilistic thing in the future. So
that's our best way to keep time and keep track of things is the past. But I don't know. Let's go to Skywalker. You've had your hand up for a bit.
You can't use it as a fishing expedition discovery. Okay, you have to have something in the complaint.
You literally can. You literally do. At best, they'll be granted leave to amend. I'm excited to see Richard file a defense for citizen. Is this fine?
Yeah, man. I was just gonna say, the reality of the situation is that all the, hundreds of thousands of people that sacrificed had expectation of profit, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't offer a token if it's a sacrifice, right? So anybody who says that they weren't expecting a profit is a freaking liar.
Skywalker, two things can be true at the same time. You could be sacrificing to put a permanent record on the blockchain for freedom of speech, and you could have a hope that if things work out, you might get something of value. And that is absolutely shown without any doubt by the fact that people chose to get less crypto if things worked out through the Sens Foundation. There's no question there were other motives.
That's a good perspective for sure, Danny. I never really thought about it like that, but there's a lot of different ways to play. I mean, I'm in it for the tech. I'm not in it for the money. So I'm with the Skywalker team.
I got one more comment, if I may. What are people's thoughts on the centralization of this? I mean, he has such a max supply. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on the theories behind him and his desires with the supply? I'm just dumbfounded by all of the people who are like.
And Skywalker, I hate to shill, I hate to do it, but this wouldn't be a problem if he just didn't have like this origin address. Like if he just burnt that origin address from a hex perspective and not Pulse perspective, it'd be a lot different game.
100%.
I don't know.
100%. I'm curious.
Yeah, maybe Poseidon can talk about
Satoshi had 100% ownership at the
Who's
beginning.
Satoshi? Who's Satoshi? Jack Levin's up here. I think he might. I mean, he's the closest guy I think I've seen to
Okay,
Satoshi.
that's funny.
That's just me.
That's funny. So Richard was probably thinking in the same way. I mean, that's how he was talking. That doesn't matter what the origin address does. If Hexus is successful, it'll be so much money that it will dilute the origin address.
Grandma, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
So let me just comment on this because this is actually a really important point, the origin address. And this is, so look, right here in the last 2 minutes, we have arguments on both sides of the origin address. And this is the key item that the SEC is going to have to show that Richard Hart controls. There's the real world where O.J. Simpson obviously killed someone. And then there's the court of law where magically he didn't kill someone. Wow. So they're going to have to prove by 51%.
The glove didn't fit. Come on.
That the glove fit. They're going to have to show that. So and that's kind of the nuance of the argument. It's not, ABC 1, 2, 3, Richard Hart is bad, Richard Hart is good. Weapons grade cryptography can be used by terrorists to hold whatever amount of money to plan whatever bad event, or it could be done to protect against the overreach of the government, or it could just be done by a regular person to secure their Gmail account, and everything in between. And this is the nuance of the matter. And both parties, both the SEC, the Hexicans / Richard, are going to have to think about a world. And this is why it's 50-50, right? And I direct you to someone in the space who's not a Hexican and is very skeptical of everything and is a very sound mind of reason in a space that's fraught with, over exuberance and insanity, is Nick Carter. And in one of Nick Carter's recent podcasts, he's a prominent VC in the space. I think his Castle Island Ventures on the Brink podcast. He talks about Richard Hart, and his co-host, who's kind of like this traditional finance guy who wears a suit. He's like, oh, this case is a slam dunk against Richard, right? The standard crypto Twitter analysis. And Nick Carter, voice of reason, you would expect him to say, agree with Eric Wall and say, this is all so horrible and Richard's a bad guy. You know what he said? He said, this is not such a slam dunk case because when people gave him the money, they were essentially saying that he could do whatever they want with it. And he agreed to that. So the fact that someone like that, who's very buttoned up, as legit as it comes in this space, he's had, prominent exits, sold his data software company. Someone like that is not saying this is a slam dunk case for the SEC, but is actually taking a nuanced approach, is kind of enough for me to see that there's something more going on here than Richard Hart's a bad guy. Maybe he controls the OA, maybe he doesn't. They'll have to prove that. Maybe he manipulated the price, maybe he didn't. They will have to prove that. And amazingly, if they have the evidence, it should be simple enough to prove by blockchain evidence. And this is where I draw you to the place in the lack of the place in the complaint, which is where kind of give silly grandmas, to her point, it doesn't show in the complaint that these are the addresses that were manipulated for the price to go up and down. We need to see that. And until we see that, I'm skeptical at best about the SEC winning, and I think it's going to be closer to a settlement than people think.
I think that's true. Yeah, we definitely got to see it. I wanted to give a shout out to Moon King B Roots. You just got to be careful who you're listening to out there. To Moon King B Roots, I know that he's part of the community. Anyways, let's get to the hands here. We got Execute, and then we got Doc. I'm actually really excited to hear from Doc. He looks like he's in Malibu. Attorney, chiropractor. Looks like he's a eclectic dude. I'm excited.
He's a bum. Don't listen to him. Don't listen to a word he says.
Shut up, Fidget.
Wow, we got some beef here. We'll get into that. I'll play referee, well, co-referee. But Execute, go ahead. Execute, you're live over there? We'll go to Doc first. Doc, how are you doing?
Yeah, go to Doc. I'm busy.
Good, thanks. I just want to come up and maybe help Silly Grandma out a little bit. She doesn't seem like she needs any help, but I wanted to sort of clarify things from an attorney standpoint. And a complaint is not the place where you provide the evidence for which people, the public, can decide whether or not someone's guilty or not. Hello?
Because I'm crazy.
Yeah, someone else has got an open mic here.
I had to get him out of here. Sorry about that. Just yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, so the complaint isn't the place to assess the evidence or the charges against a particular individual. Just speaking in general, a complaint just lays out a cause of action. It lays out. It should lay out enough probable cause, or the basis for probable cause, for the accused crime or civil tort that's been alleged, and there's an opportunity for the defendant to respond with a motion to dismiss, or in California, demur. What a demur says is, I don't know where this action is, but I guess it's federal. Demur wouldn't apply, but the concept is sort of the same in federal law. If the complaint as alleged doesn't suffice to state cause of action under the elements of a particular tort, which I guess in this case would likely include fraud. I'm not quite sure what else it includes, but certainly there's a potential for fraud here based on the differing perspectives of what was said, what was represented, and actually what sort of control this person has, and what conduct is fraudulent in the view of the federal government. So Fidgetal's right, is that you really can, as long as you can get past a motion to dismiss, then discovery is a wide open book, and both sides have to comply with it. It might be a bad complaint, Silly Grandma, and it might not be substantiated later on, but the process allows for the continuation of a suit so long as there's a proper basis alleged, but not yet proven. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Doc. I think that's it's a well-rounded perspective there.
Doc, let me ask you, when can we expect to see essentially the blockchain investigation analysis that the SEC is accusing that Richard Hart, recycled the ether, pumped the price, whatever?
Well, I think that would come, once witnesses start to take this. It's not normally the case where a defendant who learns of the government's discovery to go to the public to sort of demonstrate to the public that they're innocent based on the evidence that they have, the exculpatory evidence that the government presents, and the condemning evidence that the government presents. For me, I'm just getting the crypto as a friend of mine, although I think he's an idiot sometimes. And I would wonder if the government has a sort of expertise to present, testimony to accuse someone of blockchain fraud, if that's an accurate sort of description of what you're talking about. I think that this is so confusing and can be so easily confused by people who understand it well, that I wonder what lawyers in the SEC that they have that are competent enough to prove something like this.
None.
So, well, hold on a second. What you do there is you farm out the investigation to a company called Chainalysis, who's hired by the U.S. government all the time. In fact, that's their number one client, is the U.S. government, to do blockchain analysis to essentially decipher, who owns what.
Yeah. So, but when they bring in when either side brings in experts that are paid, those are easily castigated. That's sort of the first thing you do, no matter whether you're in criminal court or in civil court, irrespective of the claims. It's there. Each side will get experts to talk to the judge or the jury, and each side can be attacked because they're there because they're paid. But to the extent that one side or the other can prove that to the satisfaction of the judge or jury, that's something that's got to be tested in court in a particular case-by-case basis.
Right. So the beauty of the blockchain is, like, the enforcement layers in like financial crimes are so excellent that actually is the reason why blockchain has thrived over the last decade. It's just a better form of accounting than what else is out there. So if you just trip up once and you don't, use your data privacy technology software the correct way, if you just mess up once, it could be, basically look at it as like a trail of red and green lights. And if all the green lights up and there's like a 100% guaranteed trail from one wallet to another, to one asset to another. That's all very possible on a blockchain to do. And then think about it as like percentages going down. If you use the cryptography properly, the way it's kind of designed to be used for data protection, you can make it so that it's 0% chance to see it. And then there's everything in between. So all very interesting that you said that shouldn't be in the complaint, and you think it'll come out when witnesses start being deposed, and that may not happen for years from now.
Well, it'll start to cut when they exchange discovery, right? Each side will make demands of the other. The government's supposed to turn over what evidence they have that supports the complaint. They'll hold back exculpatory evidence. They'll play dirty until they absolutely have to get it out. A lot of times you spend, like you said, because years you go back and forth on what evidence is going to be admissible or not. There's always a huge fight over that. So I understand enough about blockchain, understand the simplicity in terms of accounting and proof of transfer, and that's entirely true. What I don't know is how to disprove something like that. What I don't know is how to work around those things. And what I don't understand is the question of the origin address and how you track back to that, and how do you prove that there's been some subterfuge around that. So,
perhaps you don't even need to prove the origin address, but you just need to prove the recycling of Ether. Two more questions for you. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a moment.
Let's just give you a second. We'll come to some of these hands, and we'll cycle back to you. Let's go to execute. Go to execute, and then we'll go to Tad Ape.
I think you guys are confusing like this case with a different case. They're not accusing him of Hex being a security, so you need to figure it out. Like, quit saying that. They're only accusing him of misallocating funds. So the fact that they wrote this on a paper and they're trying to like sue him, it's actually a win for Hex, because they're kind of already declaring Hex not a security. You understand that, right? Like, you can't say it's not a security and then say, oh, by the way, you misallocated funds. If you misallocated funds, then it's already not a security.
Well,
I mean,
that's it.
Interesting
point there, execute.
And that leads to the question: misallocation of funds can still be a felony level offense. And say that does happen, where whatever happens, and he ends up going to jail or jury. If it gets that far, I think he's toast. You guys talk about that later. Jury peers will like even understand this shit, and if he's toast because of his character and whatnot, and what that does in your subconscious when you're judging a person. But say without Richard Hart, do you guys think Hex and PulseNet will survive? Like, do they need a Richard Hart to steer the wheel of the vehicle, or can this shit survive?
Well, you need the Treasury. You need the Treasury, because the Treasury allows for experiments to happen that would otherwise never happen. It allows for a renaissance to happen. It allows for Florence in Italy to occur. Something like Silicon Valley. Without the capital formation of Silicon Valley, what do you have? Just a bunch of nerds in garages? With the capital, you have, everybody using semiconductors in their palms every day, from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep. The Treasury is tremendous. It's not like it's a few $1 million. It's in the hundreds of millions to potentially billions of dollars. So with the Treasury, the community has a potential renaissance on its hands. Without the Treasury, we risk just being another dead layer one.
Yeah, but you kind of understand that with Richard being Richard, and the amount of meth bots that guy's created, it's like unreal. Especially like his sandwich bots that he used to run on Hex, it was like next level shit. So let's say he knew he was going to go to jail tomorrow. What's he going to do with all that extra like slush? And he wants to like do good for the community. He's going to set up bots that are just going to keep arbing, and then are going to keep buying, and it'll just do like random buys for the future, and nobody will know about it while he's in jail.
Yeah, no, the whole jail thing, I don't think it's appropriate to go there, because the SEC, unless a case is brought in parallel historically with a U.S. government institution that has authority to bring a criminal case, he's not going to jail. So I don't want to speculate on that. And historically, I would say 90% of the time, I could be wrong, but 90% of the time, if a criminal case is not brought in parallel with the SEC, a criminal case will probably not be brought. So
They can they restrict his use of electronics, because that could be like a term, can't they? That they
yeah, but like, you know, the SEC tried silencing Elon Musk and having people review his tweets. Like, you could do anything, but if you don't have criminal jurisdiction, like, you know, all right, come at me. I'm a you know, a wealthy guy, and you're going to try to silence me. I don't know. You need
And this
access
is this
to
is
the
all
treasury.
saying that he's still a U.S. citizen. People don't even know if he revoked his citizenship and bought another one. Like he's been like not in the United States for almost 10 years now. It's
He's
like,
got a lot of trading card passports for sure. It seems like, yeah, you never know. You never know.
He is definitely a U.S. citizen. I can confirm that.
Well, even if he wasn't a U.S. citizen, he'd still be entitled to the same rights of a citizen if he's present in the U.S. or under the purview of a U.S. court. So that's not an issue. As far as silencing him during the trial, a trial judge can do that. Can put an order on the court, the entire both parties from commenting. Particularly if it's going to affect the jury pool. A judge, won't want one part or the other, sort of making allegations about the case outside of court.
Doc, when could we expect to get is it, in traditional litigation, if two private parties sue each other, one sues the other one has 30 days to answer the complaint. Does Richard Hart have to publicly file an answer to the complaint from the SEC? And if so, when's that deadline?
Yeah, so I don't work in federal practice, but generally speaking, there is a set period of time set by statute from which the party would have to respond. There's always the ability to go to the court and say, look, we need more time. But 30 days, I think, is probably a good guess. If it's not 30, it's almost entirely likely to be 60 days. So, but the court can do almost anything they want in as long as they protect the rights of both parties. They can craft any order they want and really control the motion practice in a case.
Especially federal is like a whole other fucking world. It's crazy.
Yeah, I learned to stop commenting on federal cases.
And is that
basic stuff?
Is Richard's response due in the next, we'll call it 2 weeks to 60 days? Should we expect that to have substance in it, or do you just think he'll deny, procedurally deny all the claims and save all the juice, as you said, for playing dirty later? So those are my two questions. Sorry, and then I want to ask you about how the government could play dirty. But should we expect Richard to have substance in his response, or just to have it all be procedural? Deny.
Well, I guess it depends on what his attorney's view is the strength of their case, and if they're going to move immediately to a motion to dismiss. In other words, I wouldn't offer any response beyond deny, and just a pro forma sort of response if you assume that the case has to go forward, based on your own interest, based on the evidence that you have, based on the likelihood of success that you could get the case dismissed almost immediately.
And what you said before about the government playing dirty, tell us more about that. And I think you said it had to do with when they released their evidence of, allegedly they accused Richard Hart of doing these bad things. So you said that they don't have to put those bad things necessarily in the complaint, and they could play dirty and kind of withhold their evidence for like in the movies, like a dramatic entrance in the court. Obviously it'll be in the papers and not the court. But you're saying that there could be some drama that could unfold and the government could play dirty. Can you speak a little more about that and when we could expect to see their blockchain investigation of Richard doing the bad things that they accuse?
Yeah.
Hey, Gluthine, real quick, check your DM real quick. But go ahead, Docs. My bad.
So no, so that's fine. Look at so this is the SEC. So this is Biden. This is the Democrats. These are the liberals. These are the fascists, right? That are bringing this claim in this case.
Try to not be political about it.
You just gave me so much more faith.
You're as objective as possible.
Okay, so since we're talking about the government, right? It's sort of hard because that's who the prosecutor is. It's sort of hard to isolate the potential misconduct that the government pursues in attacking its enemies. So while trying to respect your request not to be political, I'll simply say, look at the DC case that was set for trial today, less than a year away, and they have the government, the prosecution, has given Trump's attorneys 12 million pages of documents from which they could provide, bring evidence into testimony through a witness in court. So reasonably speaking, that's not just. That's a perversion of the duty that prosecutors have not to participate in malicious prosecution. And I would categorize that particular conduct that way. There's all kinds of games that can be played. And in the case of the J6 defendants, what they're telling the defendants is, look, there may be video that is exculpatory. Exculpatory evidence is evidence that tends to make the accused look innocent. And they're holding that back in many cases because they're labeling it top secret and they're not allowing it to be released. So there are a number of defendants who are saying, screw you, I'm not going to admit that I'm guilty to charges that I know I'm not guilty of, to charges that the evidence that you're holding as top secret can prove that I'm not guilty. I'm going to sit here in jail and wait. So there's all sorts of dirty shenanigans.
So let's assume that it's not going to be a January 6th situation, but something a little less,
That's not what he said.
I know, I understand, but as far as the blockchain investigation,
Thanks, Mr. President.
yeah, as far as the blockchain investigation, like that's really what this all hinges on. That Richard's going to say, listen, I don't control the OA. I didn't manipulate any of this, and you can't prove that I did. And then it's on the government to say, we hired the really special people from Chainalysis, and all this lines up that you manipulated all this, and you're a horrible person. So basically, you're saying that as far as playing dirty, what I mean to ask you is, when will the government have to show their hands? Assume that there's no secret evidence, whatever, and that this is all going to be open and it's not going to be as absurdly political as the presidential election is, but it's more of just, kind of a pretty extreme case in crypto, but it's not as bad as that. And it's all about this blockchain investigation. When will the U.S. government, SEC, have to show their blockchain investigation of Richard Hart's alleged manipulation? When do you think that will come?
Not until after they've done their own discovery, that they've, they'll get a witness list from the government. They'll want to depose each of those witnesses. They'll ask each of those witnesses for documented for evidence from them to substantiate what they're claiming. I wouldn't expect this to be released, or the evidence presented concerning the blockchain, until well after they've started the active trial. And in federal court, that can take years, and usually does.
Wow.
And keep in mind that the process is the punishment as well, because let's assume that these accusations against Richard are not true, right? Putting him through this process, one is damaging his name and reputation. Now maybe that's reasonable. I don't know the case of Mr. Hart, but the process itself, having to hire a lawyer to spend the money for an attorney to be held off from publicly speaking, really because either it's in your own best interest or the court orders you to. All of this disrupts your business and your life in a way that is incalculably stressful. If you haven't been in a lawsuit, just a normal lawsuit, right, between parties, is extremely stressful and beats down most people. A federal prosecution, even a civil one, which is targeting his business and his reputation, his ability to earn money in the future, is a very hard thing to withstand, even if you're completely innocent.
So the difference here is that Richard has a lot of money, and not only that, but he has this unbelievable ego. I think he has prom king syndrome, and that's like you weren't the prom king in high school, so like you got to be the prom king later in life. and you got to have everybody cheer you on. He's got a version of that.
He's the Donald Trump of crypto, as I say.
Yeah, which could be weaponized in a wonderful direction, like giving $27 million to the Sense Foundation. And, there's all sides to this. People
and also twerking and talking about his huge penis. Like,
all that.
I think he's so.
Are you talking about Trump or Richard Hart?
No, Richard Hart. Richard Hart is the thing. Is he's been right about a lot of stuff, but he is super annoying and has the worst crass personality. So
he's a good pole dancer, though. Shout out to Fresh and Fit.
I love and hate Richard at the same time.
So I want to. I mean, we've been going for hours. I mean, there's still 500 people here. This is nuts. Like, I don't know if we should end
save some juice for your next show, man. Save some more.
Well, real quick, isn't the whole thing if he gives $12 million, this is over?
I like burning the canoes. I don't like saving anything in the tank. No, I don't think that's the $12 million because they also accuse of manipulation of the price of Hex, and Hex went down from 50 cents to now under a penny, so people lost money there, and that's generally, when people lose money, people tell the cops on the block. And the cops on the block have to investigate, and if they have a good case, they bring it. So back to Doc's point. Doc, thanks for being here and your intelligence on the matter. Richard Hart's a wealthy guy, and what we've seen in crypto is the guys, the companies and nonprofits and people that don't have a lot of money to fight the government with litigation, they lose. Like the library credits case that was brought up earlier. I forgot who brought it up. I'm sorry, but that was a wonderful point. That library lost, but they lost because they didn't have the money to fight. Coinbase has the money to fight. XRP has the money to fight. DCG has the money to fight.
Library didn't lose because they didn't have the money. The library lost because they told them everything and they shouldn't have.
Library also they didn't have the money. Like to fight in federal court.
Yeah, but when you go into there and you're trying to have like good nomenclature with everything, you can't with them. They literally put everything on the film and said, "This is what we did." Hopefully, they told them everything and they shouldn't have.
That falls in the bucket of not being able to hire $2,000 an hour lawyers to win. That falls in the bucket of not having the money. Like XRP spend hundreds of millions in legal. Coinbase will do the same. DCG, same.
DOC, real quick. Are you a $2,000 an hour lawyer? Just curious. Asking for a friend.
No, he's talking too much. He doesn't charge.
But he's obviously a smart guy. But my point is when you're able to pay the $2,000 an hour lawyer, which before COVID it used to be like $1,000, $1,200 an hour. Now I can't believe I'm even saying that there's $2,000 an hour lawyers. When you're able to pay those, what you're able to do is both substantively and intellectually, obviously make probably the strongest case you can make. But then also procedurally, you can get all your associates on the case. You can have your partners on the case. You could build up a storm. You could hold up the you could hold up the government with procedural matters that otherwise would have never been brought. You could bring random constitutional cases. You could pay lobbyists to do crazy things. You could pay experts at top Ivy League institutions, legal scholars that are constitutional experts or securities matter experts. You could pay them to file amicus briefs. You can just go so hard on the matter. Library didn't pay that. They didn't have the money. And who shows, oh, I did all these things bad? I don't even think a government employee who gets a speeding ticket would say, oh, you got me. No one does that. You always challenge it. Right? And what my point is that if you have lots of money to challenge the government, you got a good shot. I think Richard has lots of money. Maybe he doesn't, but I think he does. And
it's easy. It's easier to play on the line when you have money, right? Because the line is in, right? So it's like Richard's definitely a habitual line player, and whether people say it's in or out, that's up for the legal process.
Keep in mind the government has unlimited money and unlimited resources and unlimited attorneys.
Whoa. No. Where I disagree with you is they're not incentivized to have unlimited resources. they're incentivized to collect their paycheck and go home at 5 or 6 o'clock.
Well,
Whereas the
that's
$2,000 an hour lawyers are incentivized to have a ridiculous penthouse in Manhattan and make $5 million a year. That's the difference.
well, the guys that you're talking about that get the $2,000 an hour, hourly rate, those are almost entirely former SEC employees and attorneys for the SEC. They flip right around. They have friends on the inside. That's how these guys are really effective. It's because of their relationships, not because of their stellar legal theories that blindly allow juries and judges to kiss their feet. Again, FTX supposedly is spending $1.5 million a day defending right now. They can't cripple anybody, no matter how much money they have. Now, I don't know the particulars on Richard Hart's case, but the SEC coming after you, I know something about this. I don't litigate, but I'm a registered arbitrator with FINRA, with the Financial Industries Regulatory Authority, where all of the cases about fraud from brokers comes to first before they go to court. So I've seen quite a bit, and people should rightly fear the power of our government turned against someone that they're trying to attack.
So what do you think the proper budget is? 10 million, 20 million? It's not a criminal case yet, mind you. This is a civil case.
Well, they could turn it around and make it a criminal case.
No.
I
don't want to speculate on that matter. Doc, the budget to give yourself the best defense, 10 million, 20 million, I think that's in the realm of what Richard can pay.
Yeah, I think that I just don't know enough about the case to give you an estimate that I would want you to repeat anywhere else. It's certainly in the millions, and maybe
we're not dealing with a normal person here. We're dealing with potentially a billionaire. We're dealing with
big peepee.
Yeah, we're dealing with someone who has the biggest ego you've ever seen, that wants to be enshrined in the history of the crypto wars. Alan Turing, Phil Zimmerman, Hal Finney, Vitalik Buterin, CZ Binance, Richard Hart. Like, that's how he wants to see it. Like, this is a certified, situation for the highest of stakes, pun intended, and he's potentially a billionaire. So,
right. Well, if he beats the government, that's going to add to his cachet, right? So, yeah, he's apparently motivated to do that, not just in effect to enhance his ego, is what you're saying, but also to protect his business. So, it's really hard for me to answer, case specific questions about this without really knowing the case. I came up because I know Fidget is a personal friend, and we started off with each other going hammer and tongs politically, but he and I are working on a crypto project together. So that's why.
That's exciting.
You spoke about it. Can you briefly talk about that project? You spoke about it. It was very, very interesting.
So I don't know what to say, because I'm not a principal. That the principal here are Dustin Johnson, his fiancee Jennifer, the American Mission. We're intending to create a token that's paired with political advocacy. And I guess one sort of description of what the thought is that some tokens will go to volunteers in return for their support of the mission and its mission. The other will be an investment opportunity for people who want to support a particular issue or candidate support that the mission would choose to support or identify. And we would target people who would say give $1,000 to the Trump campaign because they like Trump, or give $1,000 to a PAC because they like that PAC's purpose. Say it's to support trans surgeries for children. And we know that there are hundreds of
Just real quick, I think there's something in the background that's making some noise.
Yeah, I don't know if that's if you're walking, Doc, or if that's what's going on there. It's almost.
No,
like
I'm sorry. I just moving my phone around because I was walking, but I'll stand still here for a second. So the notion is that we would target people who would give political donations to a PAC or a candidate to give to the mission, and in return receive this token, which has the perspective of appreciating it in value, so that they have some return for their charitable contribution to the mission. So that's a real broad strokes. We're still working it out. We started a 501c4 to be the legal base for it, but we haven't put out any white papers, and there's a lot of detail work going on in the background right now.
That's really powerful. And I'd imagine that this case is really important for that because, you know, it blurs the line between the First Amendment and money, advances the Citizens United case. And essentially, if you donate to you're basically incentivizing people to donate to good causes.
Yeah, political advocacy that you believe in, as opposed to just, throwing the money into a campaign and hope it doesn't get used for lobster and steak and JetX flights.
Where can we follow along? That actually sounds potentially quite wonderful.
Follow Fidgetal, follow Dustin Johnson, or follow me, and we'll be coming out with more information about this in the coming weeks.
Yeah, thanks so much.
I'll put something in the nest for it because I'm on the more political side of this, and we with the whole thing, we have some big dreams of creating a party infrastructure. Kind of. So the whole thing is if you look at the two parties, the Republican Party can be taken over and be moral again, and that's kind of in the long run the end of it. But it's called CBDC because it's supposed to be bringing awareness to. So it's kind of like beating to the gate. And so there's a lot of it's really cool, but I'll put up Dustin stuff so you guys can get up here. I think a lot of people in here would really like the project.
Cool, yeah. Post that up in the nest. We're gonna go to these hands because I'm sure you guys are getting cramps in your hands because you guys have been holding so long. So we'll go to Punisher and then we'll go around the horn. I think Silly Grandma and then some of these new faces in here.
Yeah, I just wanted to probably this question is more directed at Doc. But when do you recommend that? Looking at overall the case, and I see this happening with a lot of crypto projects. Do you see the government utilizing, malicious prosecution, under federal rules of civil procedure? And how can we mitigate that, especially if you're an attorney? Should people be able to exercise the Federal Arbitration Act of 1983 to be able to handle this, to get it out of the SEC's jurisdiction? So wanted to get your opinion.
Well, it's not really in the SEC's jurisdiction, and I think this case, in some respects, is an effort to try and capture the crypto market in a regulatory way that they were sort of pushed back away from the table with the I'm drawing on the crypto company that's been fighting this for a couple of years and just won, and it's now appealed. XRP, thank you. So, I think the government is going to continue to strike at individuals and companies that, in effect, allow a way to work outside of U.S. currency and its regulatory environment. And I think it's going to get more active and more aggressive, more abusive as we go forward, particularly if we maintain a Democratic administration going forward, because we see what they've been like the last 3 years. So there's no reason not to expect the same conduct if they're reelected or someone who supports the current administration is elected in Biden's place. And I'm jumping into this one because I'm an older guy. I'm 64. I understand the financial markets. I used to be a Series 7 broker. I worked for Lehman back in the 80s, and didn't get my law degree until I was 50. But I've really latched onto this for the crypto space, and my efforts to support crypto, generally speaking, as an alternative to what we're going to see coming down the road is central bank digital currencies here in the U.S. And that, I think, is abhorrent, not only from freedom standpoint, but also from the stand from a political standpoint. So I'm seen as valuable to the extent that I'm seen as valuable with this group is because of my political acumen and the ability to speak to older Americans, right? To bring them in. If I can get comfortable with the technology and the jargon, which is quite a hill to climb, I can tell you, then I can teach that to people my age, people of my experiences, because crypto will really explode when you get away, in my opinion, from the deviant stuff when you understand that this can be a real competitor to the U.S.'s domination, not just of our own currency market, but the worldwide currency markets. And I think that's a good thing, because I think that in essence promotes freedom generally.
Well,
So,
especially
yeah,
especially when
I
it's
just wanted
free.
to go ahead. Simple.
I'm sorry, especially when it's fair crypto. I think that's the biggest thing. If it's fair, then it offers an opportunity for every user to be able to empower themselves by holding their own keys and having their own economic energy without having any counterparty risk or middlemen or anything like that. I think that's a huge point, just in alignment with where you're kind of putting out there upon the water, right? Where it's like this is huge power as far as like the ability for self-sovereignty and to be able to have your own economic energy
But
for
see,
yourself and to
Simple,
be able to harvest that. Go
I
ahead,
just
Punch.
wanted to reply. Oh, I apologize. I just wanted to point this out, but isn't the whole purpose of the FCC is to regulate anyone that's acting in a third party or fiduciary capability? So I don't see why they have jurisdiction in crypto, right? If we're talking about fair crypto.
yeah, they really don't. Yeah, but they're
And
trying, right?
Well, hold on a
but that's
second.
my
I have
whole
to
point.
push back. I have to, vehemently disagree that this is a highly nuanced. I mean, for you to say that securities fraud has never been happened in the history of crypto, I think is outrageous. I could point to endless amount of projects are just literally straight up fraud. Now, that doesn't mean that this one is or everyone is, but to say that they have absolutely no jurisdiction,
No,
come on.
No, obviously you're right. There's nuances in it, but all I'm trying to point out, if the project is done properly, right? Why is Bitcoin considered a commodity than opposed to a security?
Well,
Because there's no founder.
that took a decade for that to
Yeah,
happen.
but
I would
yeah,
actually argue that when Bitcoin was first launched, it was obviously a security. It was controlled by a very small group of people that were kind of putting stuff out there and making stuff happen. And without them, the project would have went to zero. So
yeah, but no, you're totally right. I agree with you. I'm just saying that there's nuances, right? You have to look at if this company, like let's say for instance, we're talking about Richard Hart. If Richard Hart act in some type of fiduciary capacity and he misappropriated funds, yes, we're talking about a security. Then there is some violation there, which actually they have jurisdiction. So all I'm just pointing out, just depending on the project of how, like what Simple just mentioned, if it's fair crypto, it passed the Howey test. If it's peer-to-peer transaction, there isn't any third parties involved in it. Then where does the SEC come in to regulate? There isn't. So that's all I just wanted to point out.
yeah, I mean, the reason why they went after him is because he was flashing all, the Louis Vuitton bags, the biggest diamond, the world's biggest PP, and $1 billion was raised.
Yeah,
There's
but
so
that's
many.
Did you
presumption, right?
Gluthon, did you see his PP? You didn't see his PP, right?
No,
But
You're
never.
not
But
a lot
the
of but in all due respect, isn't that's all based on presumption? Like they just put a case out on him, and for like if you're looking at a defense, he can countersue based on malicious like prosecution if they can't prove
all
anything.
that. But you don't want to sue the government. That usually doesn't work out so well. But
Well, then they
to
handle
your
through arbitration, right? What are the remedies? What are the
to your
remedies you
point,
can take?
to your point, the government also has to live in the world where they lose, and that's kind of where I think that a settlement is best for everybody involved. Because I said it earlier on this Spaces. Imagine the U.S. government loses to Richard Hart. That would be the end of the world. There would be open season on everything crypto. Bitcoin probably goes to some outrageous number. And the world is destabilized, and the crypto people, the pirates, are now in control for the next 100 years. You have random billionaires of lunatics everywhere, not guys in suits on television, but crazy people wielding war chests of hundreds of millions of dollars that could do whatever they want, that could take on the FDA, that could have their own militias, drone armies, anti-drone armies, their own GPT-5s, their own GPT-6s, private jet. So imagine they lose. So they have to live in that world where they might lose, and which means they probably have to settle. And this is going to be drawn on.
The future is integrity, I think, at the core level of all this. And even the reason why we're having this conversation in and of itself, it's like, if he was acting integral, Richard, which, hey, I'm no one to judge, but if integrity was the core of his offering and what he was bringing to the marketplace, then there would probably be no problems, and there'd probably be more advancement inside the crypto sphere. I will say Richard Hart is a genius, whether people want to, call him that or not. He is, but you can pay for school, but you can't buy class. And there's certain ways that he could have conducted himself in a more classy manner from my perspective, and
Yeah, but
just been about growing the
The
crypto
funny
world at
thing,
large.
the funny thing about this is Richard Hart only put on that like stupid. What did he call it?
I want the top hat, Richard Hart. That's what I want.
But he
Fringe
only changed.
campaign.
He only changed because he needed to play the bad character for the movie, right? Like he only did all that shit just to be in the movie.
So he's like
Like,
Anakin Skywalker, kind of, in a way.
yeah, he just had to play a role in a movie, and he was like, "Oh, I got to go buy a bunch of shit and look like a badass or like a villain for my movie," and now obviously like he's not doing it because the movie's done. So it's
Whoever
like,
the writers are for this movie inside the movies, they're good writers. That's all I'll say about that. But let's get to these hands. So let's go to 6, and then we'll go to.
So I'm gonna put up a 10-minute warning. The space is going on for I don't even know how long. What time are we at now?
If we're charging 2,000 an hour, you guys owe me a couple bands. That's all I'm saying about that. Bands will make them dance. They'll make Richard dance too. So be careful.
I'm putting a 10-minute warning on it, and we'll come back, next time. So we got till 7:40. So just try to be respectful, and let's try to get everybody up here.
4:40 on the West Coast, which is the best coast. But I'm not chill on the West Coast. But go west, my friends. 6, what's going on?
I believe Silly Grandma was in front of me, and what's his name or what's her name? Inviting.
No, I just haven't heard your voice. Don't try to be all nice now. Just
no, I had a question. I had a question for Doc regarding that token that he was shilling earlier. I wanted to, bottom line, I don't care what it does because I don't think coming to crypto for a charitable token it's worth it because we have seen hundreds, maybe thousands I've seen of tokens that are developed. But my thing or bottom line is how is it going to gain, any value, right? I'm just interested in that. Maybe you don't have the full facts.
Just to be clear, I'd love to be able to answer your question, but I'm not in a position to shill, and I didn't mean to shill if that's the way someone took it. I was asked a question about what it was about, and I'm not recommending any securities, not recommending any tokens. This thing is still in development stage, but if Fidget was mentioning it, then I was just offering something I would hope would clarify further, but I'm not here to recommend anyone buy it.
Appreciate that,
6.
Doc.
I put it in the Nest or the Xbox, whatever we're calling it. You can click on there, and if you want to, you can ask Dustin a million questions and stuff. A lot of it it's more of a political activist coin, and it gives you voting and a DAO. It's much bigger than anything me or
Vinny, did you take the red pill or the blue pill?
I don't.
I'm just kidding. Silly, what's going on?
You gotta take them both.
I take mushrooms.
One second. The reason I asked that, Doc, was because just to let you know, you're in a recorded space, and you did kind of gave off a feeling where if I did invest into this security, I will be recompensated with the value that you guys are providing to this token. FYI.
Yeah. I'm going to disclaim that from Doc. I don't think he said that at all. He was saying, an experimental thing that they're working on. And, why don't we just move on from that? I don't think you have anything to be worried about, Doc. And he was not promising anything of value in return.
Trust me, I'm not worried at all, but go ahead.
Yeah. They're working on a project, and just everybody relax. We only have about 7 minutes left. So if you have any, comments about the case, let's kind of stay on topic. Let's use this time wisely.
I would like to say if Richard attaches chain analysis to the motion to dismiss that shows that the OA did not use any money for his extravagance or crashing the market, that would put water on this SEC case and it could be dismissed.
I like it. Silly Grandma, you're hired.
Sold. No, it's fun and honestly, guys, I know there's a little bit time cap here, but this has been a really awesome space. Let's get a couple of these hands, and one thing I want to just point out there, and I didn't mean to hopefully this didn't overshadow anyone's voice here, but I just want to point this out real quick.
To operate on the basis of caveat emptor, let the buyer beware.
So caveat emptor, buyer beware. So anyone chilling or anything in between, anyone trying to guide you in any type of way, just do your own homework, do your own due diligence. Nothing that we're saying here is financial advice, at least for me personally. I can't speak on the others, but let's get to inviting freedom and happy healer.
Hey guys, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm surprised that the question of whether Hex is a security is still an actually debated topic. Reason being, I know that there's a trust of advisors that handle, I guess, up to $1 billion portfolio, maybe more, and they hired an SEC attorney and they paid the SEC attorney to basically clear Hex as a security, so they could be safe in what they do, and they're pretty big. So it's very interesting, and a very high attorney in the SEC. I'll just say that.
Is that public? What you're describing, is that public?
Is it public knowledge? It should be for anyone who pays attention in the Hex community. Or yeah.
No, that you said there's a written document by an SEC.
I didn't say anything about a
attorney that
written
Hex is not-
document. What I said was it was cleared to a particular a trust, a company that handles up to $1 billion huge portfolio, hired an SEC attorney high in the SEC to clear Hex as a security. And I don't know how public the knowledge is, but I'm pretty sure that the trust wouldn't, just risk wise wouldn't lie about something like that. So I mean they're still doing it, and this wasn't this year, it was a year ago or maybe more. That this
I would love to see that. If you have any information on that, I would love to see it. If you want to drop it in the comments of the chat.
Yeah, you would have to talk to the particular the advisors of the trust company, because they're the ones who handle it.
Well, any information that you can
Yeah.
give on that, just leave it in the comment, and I'd be interested to follow up on it.
Sure. And I just have a question for Doc. I'm curious, some of the subpoenas that are going out to community members in the Hex community, it says it's kind of like coming up like a John Doe versus Richard Hart. Why isn't there like an identified person or entity that is like identified as being harmed or has been harmed? I'm just curious about that.
So it probably means the SEC believes that individuals have been harmed for other reasons without identifying the individual yet. They can bring the complaint as under a doctrine called respondent superior, that they have because they're involved in the regulatory and protecting the public from regulatory abuses or security abuses, that they probably have. That what that means to me is they probably haven't found someone who's been directly harmed by this conduct. So that's why they're identifying as a DOE. DOE defendants is a practice both in federal and at least California state courts. When you believe that a party is responsible, but you haven't been able to identify them in that particular responsibility, then you name them as DOEs. And most complaints will name DOEs 1 through 100. And then through discovery, you'll find out people that are either culpable or have been harmed. And that's when a plaintiff or a defendant DOE would then be named later on once they have that. So the fact that that's the case, that's the way they're sending these subpoenas out, it's an indication of the weakness of their case, in my opinion, that they're just surfing. So it's interesting. I really do need to look into the case more to comment, further these sorts of questions, honestly.
Thank you. That's absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate that very clear-cut answer. And yeah, that's basically what's going on. And what's frustrating is, even though it's not looked at this way, I know from people who come from a status view, if you don't, I guess the first subpoena like that'll come to you will come in like an invitation type format. If you look them up to any of the case numbers of the Hex community members that received them, they've been John Doe versus Richard Hart Schuler, right? What's interesting is if they're not answered and they don't show up, cops come and then they bring you forcibly by guns and they jail you. And I think that that's really important to know that people have actually gone to jail at this point in time for now what has not been even identified as someone who's been has had a crime committed against them or their property, and people are spending nights in jail. So it just look at the justice system. I appreciate the time to contribute. Thank you again for the answer.
Yeah, so going back to glutathione, you were asking about what sort of conduct would represent an abusive process. I would say that this conduct, as young lady has described it, is a very abusive.
Yeah, I'm pushing back on that. If anyone went to jail over Hex, I think we'd hear about it. If you're
Well, real quick, just want to put this out there. One of the community members that's in one of the crypto groups that I'm in. He's got a big name and he likes the color green, as we all like green. He put out there that he got locked up and was released.
Yeah, I think that was Trayvon you're referring to. I think
yeah,
that was
might not be. Yeah,
I think it was Trayvon you're referring to, and I don't think it was over. I don't know.
It was. He has a video, Glutathione, just to help you out. He does have a video of the actual cop coming and explaining what happened. So it was because he did not respond properly to the second invitation, so to speak. He understood the first to be an invitation when he didn't show up, and he missed the court date. That's why they came and they jailed him. And they put him in jail for 2 days.
Yeah, contempt of court. You can't. The court has identified you and your address, even though if you're John Doe, you decided to say fuck it. Yeah, they're gonna come get you.
Is that a Trayvon video on Twitter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
not on Twitter. I think on his YouTube channel, and he shows the video of the cop, and then he also gives the case number and all that other stuff. If anyone wants to look into that, but
I'll check it out.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's all the time we have today, but if you don't mind, I'll play a little tune here and just like.
Buying some capital. I'm in my ism.
All right, guys, I'm signing off. I'm sorry if we didn't get to you. I see Tad Ape and Parkway Production. I see you guys. Come next time. We're going for like 5 hours. I'm exhausted. All right, guys. I hope everybody learned something today. Godspeed.
Don't act like they ain't never sold you.